Good morning, everyone. This is Andrea Swan. I'm the Pretreatment Coordinator for the City of Sumner, Washington. And we also have Carissa Holmes on here. She works with the City of Redmond, and we're going to moderate the 2020 Pacific Northwest Pretreatment Workshop today. We're so glad that everyone could join us. It's my understanding that we've got pretreatment professionals from all over the country, so that's really exciting. We're happy to be able to pull together a workshop this year. It's too bad it's not in person, but we are all doing what we need to do to get through this strange year. We wanted to do a little housekeeping before we started the first session, and I'm going to just go through it once. So if you have any questions about what I go through now, please feel free to use the chat feature or the questions box. If you guys need CEUs for this workshop, we are utilizing the poll feature through GoToWebinar to confirm your participation and attendance. And that will need to be done at the hourly. So we will send out a poll and you will complete the poll, and GoToMeetings will generate a record of your attendance, and we will use that when we generate the CEU certificates. And that's the way that we have agreed to monitor attendance with the CEU Accreditation Council, OESAC here in our region. We have run into some issues with the polling function. So if the poll doesn't pop up on your screen or you're not able to take it, we've gotten guidance that if you minimize your screen or minimize the pop-up, you will be able to complete the poll. So try that, but if you still cannot complete the poll, please, and you need CEUs, please use the chat box or the Q&A box to let us know. That'll show us that you are there and attending, and then we'll work with you through it on the back end. If you have any questions for the presenters, feel free to use the Q&A box, and we will share the questions either in real time with the presenter or at the end of their presentation. It just depends on the preference of the presenter. And we value your feedback, so please, there will be a very brief survey at the end of each daily session. So please take a moment to complete that. Today we have, let's see. There we go. Today we have a really exciting workshop. We're going to start the morning with Al Garcia. He's with EPA Region 8. He's going to be talking about the industrial pretreatment program. He's going to do an overview of field considerations. At 9, Stephanie Kearns with the City of Newport will be joining us, and she'll be presenting about working towards compliance and sharing the journey that their city went through to permit a large brewery while simultaneously building a new program. At 10, we have Lisa Luck with Baxter and Woodman. They're out of Chicago, Illinois. And she's presenting about, her presentation is conducting effective industrial user site inspections. And finally, Lindsay Cowles with Salt Lake City, Utah, will be presenting industrial specific inspections. Finally, we have put together a virtual networking event for the folks that are in our region that attend our workshop every year. You know that we put a lot of time and effort into a networking event during our workshop. And, you know, we were really sad not to be able to see everyone in person. So we're putting together a Zoom meeting on Thursday. I apologize, the PowerPoint has the wrong day. The date is correct. It's Thursday, November 12th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to have we're kind of approached it like a table topic scenario. So we're going to have 3 breakout rooms with pre-treatment related topics. And then we're going to have a general room for just more general and lively discussions. So I'll send out more information. You will contact me to sign up for that and let me know which breakout room you'd like to be invited to. And so look for an email with more information once we get the flyer in and ready to send out. So with that, if there are any questions, use one of the communication features, and please do take the poll at the end of the day. All right, well, we'll go ahead and hand the reins over to Al Garcia. Al, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to share with us and our pre-treatment community today.
Hey, thanks, Andrea. Let me get this going. I just wanted to thank the Pacific Northwest, the PNPW for inviting me to present in this conference. They have one of the best regional conferences, and I'll talk a little bit more about the human element of pretreatment because, we can talk a lot about the regulations, but what is really the intangible part of pretreatment that makes it such a very cool program is that there's a human element in it. It's not codified in the regulations, but there's no doubt about it. When you are working in the pretreatment program, regardless of where you're at, there's always that human element. So I'm gonna talk about just what does that mean to a pre-treatment program. 2020 is such a strange year. I applaud the Pacific Northwest for putting on this conference. We had our regional conference in Region 8 that was unfortunately postponed in May because it was so close to the pandemic and everything that happened back in the spring. But what makes us so unique is that our ability to adapt. And so 2020 has been a really interesting year for adaptation. It's been, both personally and professionally. I haven't been in the office since March. I've been pretty much in shorts since March, and I'm trying to make it go all the way for 365 days. We'll see. But it's our ability to adapt. It's our ability to understand, identify what's happening around us, to be able to plan and focus and prioritize based on that, and be able to move forward with that adaptation sort of policy or procedures that we have. The same thing applies to pretreatment. I guarantee you on December 31st of this year, I'm not going to celebrate 2021 coming in. I'm going to say goodbye to 2020 and all you murder hornets that are out there. But that's also part of a pre-treatment program is our ability to adapt, our ability to identify, to prioritize, and then to move forward with a good preparation and a good plan. I'll talk a little bit about that. But my experiences, for those of you that don't know me, I've been at EPA for 11 years now. But the majority, before that, I was working at a local pre-treatment program. Started off out of college doing sampling, doing inspections, popping manholes, and just understanding the field aspects of pretreatment. And with every aspect of pretreatment, there's always a humbling nature of it. There's always stories that you can always tell about that. This is what I've learned. Hopefully, I won't make this mistake again. And so I learned the field aspect of pretreatment, and I got a lot of stuff spilled on me in that experience. That's kind of my badge of honor, so to speak. There's a lot of honor working for a poop plant, I've always said, when I was a local pre-treatment program. Then I started going into permitting and writing and compliance evaluation and enforcement, so that helped to round out my local experience. Then I became a manager of a program, and you always learn. And I realized that, when you hire new and fresh perspectives, they really ask questions, and it's almost like having someone new coming into your family and just asking questions about why you do things, and they always ask why. And I've always told staff when they come in is that if I ever say we are operating this way because this way we've always done it, slap me across the head. Because that's not the way we want to operate. We want to adapt. We want to move forward. We want to prioritize, and say, why are we doing this? We are developing this Wikipedia of knowledge, which is a great intuitive way of operating, but we also need to verify the sources behind that. Are we operating under the regulations? Are we operating under procedures that are accurate and defensible? And so whenever someone new came in and they asked me, why are you sampling this way? It made me go back and say, all right, let me go back to why this framework happened. And, do I need to document it? Do I need to look at the regulations? Do I need to improve it? We're always improving. So, you know, that's kind of part of pretreatment that I really wanted to let everyone know is that, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to be human. We're all human, but let's make sure that we learn from those. Let's make sure that we document. Let's make sure that we adapt, and let's move forward with a good plan in order to continually improve our processes. So, those are on Thursday. I'm going to talk about the office part of pretreatment. So this whole presentation that we had talked about is that I'm going to just give stories about how I started and some of the lessons that I've learned, and just trying to pass that on. No one comes into pretreatment with a handy set of tools that will get them on the ground running. There's always a time where we feel like we're a Yugo trying to merge onto the superhighway. And I experienced that when I first started the pretreatment on the field aspect. I experienced that when I came into the office and became a permit writer in the local program, and I experienced that when I came to EPA. So just remember that it's okay. There's a human element in pretreatment, and it's up to us to determine how we're going to operate both individually and as a group, in our program. But let me start from the beginning. Back in the 70s, back when we were all pups, if many of us were even born back then, the Clean Water Act started in the early 70s. This is a result of a lot of issues that were occurring pre 1972. There was rivers on fire. There was no development along rivers because they were treated as open sewers. There was a lot of beach closings. There was a lot of things happening in the United States waterways. Right? It's great to have that as a jewel, as a development opportunity in cities. In Denver, there's a lot of condos that they've developed in downtown next to the rivers. This didn't happen in the 60s. The only people that lived by the rivers were people who had vans. Now it's a great development opportunity, but all those problems they were having in the 60s really started that public outcry to do something about the United States waterways. That was the beginning of the Clean Water Act 1972. There's a lot of elements with the Clean Water Act. One, we provided billions of dollars to help with infrastructure, to help with drinking water. With the Drinking Water Act, we helped with wastewater plants. We helped with collection system. We provided a lot of money to help with that infrastructure to ensure that we're up to a certain level. With that came conditions. Is that we're helping you to upkeep you and maintain your infrastructure. Let's make sure we protect it. So we established regulations for direct discharges, which many of you have heard, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or the NPDES program. All your wastewater treatment plants have an NPDES permit that's either issued by the EPA region or by the state, depending on where you're at in the United States. And then we also developed the National Pretreatment Program, which applied to indirect discharges that discharge to that wastewater treatment plant. So this is a really crude map of a service area of any city. It doesn't matter if your population is 1,000 or 100,000 or a million. This is your service area. You'll see that there's a wastewater treatment plant, or POTW, publicly owned treatment works, and it receives wastewater. It discharges to the river under the NPDES program, and it also has another waste stream, the biosolids, which goes into land application, hopefully, or amendment of soils, or it could go other places, depending on the quality of the biosolids and the political decisions that you make locally. But in your service area, you'll have the residential sector. One element that I always like to keep in mind is that the residents, we design, we engineer, we build the wastewater treatment plants for the residents. We want to make sure they have that right to have wastewater treatment. There's a fine line that separates us from chaos, and one of them is having adequate drinking water and having appropriate and adequate wastewater treatment. So there's a right for residents to have that ability to have wastewater treatment. The commercial sector and the industrial sector, they have that ability to discharge to your plant also, but under conditions. any pretreatment regulations or local, or local conditions that you adopt in your ordinance or your rules and regulations are designed to protect your wastewater treatment plant from the impact of non-domestic sources. So industrial, commercial, and then also this truck that was driving around your service area, this truck to haul waste service provider. They do a great benefit to your community, to your region, but you have that ability to ensure that you're able to accept that concentrated waste. So pretreatment applies to the commercial, to the industrial, and the truck hauled waste that comes to your wastewater treatment plant. You can always provide outreach to the residents, but the regulations are intended to impose conditions. Again, the privilege to discharge to your wastewater treatment plant under conditions of your pretreatment program. So these are the elements that we are designed to prevent, to be proactive. Pretreatment is a proactive program. So now I combined all of the non-domestic into one little graphic here, but when they discharge to your PHW, a publicly owned treatment works is both a wastewater treatment plant and a collection system. So pretreatment being proactive is designed to minimize or eliminate the issues that may occur in your collection system, such as obstructions with oil and grease, explosions that may happen from hazardous waste or vapors or fumes, injuries to workers, which is very important to me. Both when I was local and here at EPA, I'm very concerned about worker health and safety. We want to make sure we protect them. There's a lot of people that are working in the collection system and also at the wastewater treatment plant. We want to ensure that we protect the biological processes and the chemical processes of the wastewater treatment facility to ensure that any non-domestic users, high or low pH, don't have an interferent condition on your wastewater treatment plant that may affect the ability of it to treat and cause pass-through into surface waters or violations of your permit. Any partitioning of pollutants may also go to your biosolids and really impact your decision on whether or not you can land apply it or have to send it to a landfill or maybe have to incinerate it. So you really want to make sure that you're protective of those conditions of your treatment plant. So these are the goals of that pretreatment program, designed to prevent pass-through, interference, contamination of the biosolids or treatment sludge, or any impacts to worker health and safety. So again, that's that sort of 10,000-foot overview. Remember, that what makes a pretreatment program successful is not EPA, although we do have some sort of role in it, is not the state. They also have a role in it. It's you guys that are local. It's you guys that are, that live, that play, that work in your community, that understand your community, that know the political aspects of your community, that are really invested in your community. That you guys are the ones that make the pretreatment program successful. You guys have that same authority that we have once you adopt these into your ordinance, your rules and regulations, to go out and do inspections, to have the ability to have right of entry, to gather information, to gather data, to take pictures, to characterize that facility, to determine what are the applicable pretreatment standards, implement that in a permit, evaluate compliance against those standards, and enforce. Okay, that is an awesome responsibility to protect your wastewater treatment plant. So just remember that you guys are the ones that are on the forefront of this pretreatment program. You guys are the ones that make us successful. There are some requirements, for every approved pretreatment program, and then there's also some things that not approved pretreatment programs too. So here at EPA, I have Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming, where I go out and do inspections and audits and PCIs and sampling and approve regulations. And so I'm really invested in the approved pretreatment programs. I'm also providing training. I'm also providing outreach to some of the wastewater operators in the non-approved program. So another thing that I would hope to get out to everyone today is think about some of these non-approved programs, smaller rural areas near your wastewater treatment plant. Can you provide outreach to them? Can you help them protect their wastewater treatment plant too? Because a lot of times the chief operator is also, the voluntary pretreatment coordinator is also the person who jets out the lines. They also can use some help in protecting the wastewater treatment plant from any sort of non-domestic discharges that may occur in their plant. So, this is pretty basic. Who is required to develop a pretreatment program? the first bullet is important, sure. PHW is above a design capacity of 5 mgd, but that's not the only one. The other part of this equation is, does your PHW, have a industrial user base that contributes significant wastewater with the potential to cause pass-through or interference? So is that potential to cause, to discharge industrial loading in such a quantity or concentration or volume to cause impact to your wastewater treatment plant? That's what I look at whenever I go out and evaluate cities to determine if they need an approved pretreatment program. Oops. There we go. So I'll always try to provide guidance manuals. A lot of the elements of the pretreatment program is described in this introduction to the pretreatment program guidance manual that we have. So here is the website to this, and this provides you just that background, that element of here's the infrastructure of a pretreatment program. Here's all the different components. So these are what I look for when I go out and do audits. When I go out and do audits, it's an opportunity for me to get to know the pretreatment coordinator, because again, this is a human element type of program. There's a lot of there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of communication that occurs, regardless of the type of correspondence that we have. So for me, audits are ability for me to go out to that particular city to try to understand the city. I'm only there for a week at the most, so how much can I understand the city? I try to visit breweries, I try to visit coffee shops, I try to visit local restaurants just to get a flavor of the community, and then I'll also mountain bike if I can. But I also want to get to know the pretreatment coordinator. I want to understand how he or she operates, how he or she thinks, and just is there any opportunity for me to provide training, to provide outreach, and also to learn from them, on how they operate and how they do things. So I'll look at the legal authority, I'll look at procedures on how to implement the program. Again, we're talking about permit writing, sampling, inspections. I'll look at, what is their funding, what is their resources, how defensible, how current are their local limits? Does their enforcement response provide the consistent response to any sort of violations that occur at a pretreatment program? And what is their industrial waste inventory? What are their procedures? What are their resources? What is their commitment to go out and understand their service area and characterize facilities in the service area? So for this one, for this hour, I wanted to talk about the field aspects of this. So implementation procedures, and I'm sorry there's different colors. I don't know what happened with the enforcement response plan. I think I fat fingered when I meant to have a different color. And I want to talk about the industrial waste survey. I want to talk about those two things and some of the lessons I learned when I first started as a field person in the pretreatment program. So let's start with this. Okay, so there's an important building block that you have procedures. And again, this is something that I've learned when I first started. When I first started at Littleton Englewood, this is in the southern part of Metro Denver. I had a laboratory background, I had a chemistry and a biology degree, but didn't really know what this whole thing was called pretreatment. I knew that it was something outside of the lab. I came out of a wastewater treatment plant lab. I knew that it was something that I was able to go out to the service area and do some sort of sampling, do some sort of inspections, but I really didn't understand the pretreatment program. So I started off on the field level and went out and popped manholes for restaurants for the FOG program. I popped manholes to learn how to sample, to put in samplers. I took grab samples out of stopcock valves, and so I learned that aspect. I learned the sampling part of it. What I did not learn was, what do the procedures mean? And so I was the person that honestly, I started off as a crew member. I went out, I looked at the sampling plan, and I went out and did samples. And took samples. If the sampling wasn't current, then I would come back and talk to the pretreatment coordinator, who would then make those changes, and then I would go out and just implement that. As I gathered experience, I started understanding, what does it mean to have representative sampling? And then I understand what does it mean to start being involved in the sampling plan. That was my first experience in the pre-treatment program. So I was able to then learn the sampling part of it. Sampling is pretty interesting, because you got to think about what is representative at an industrial user. And at one industry, so you can have a metal finisher in one part of the city, the same type of metal finisher in another part of the city, the sampling will be totally different. And so the first lesson I learned is not worrying about grab sampling, not worrying about composite sampling, worrying about what is representative. And then make that be your infrastructure as far as determining what is your sampling plan. What is representative of a batch tank that discharges less than 2 hours versus a batch tank that discharges 5 batches over a 24-hour period. Those two sampling protocols are different. So you really want to start from that representative sampling. What does that mean to their discharge? And if the discharge changes, then how do you adapt? Again, how do you adapt that sampling plan to address their type of sampling? That's the first lesson I learned was just how to be a sampler, and the skills, the techniques, the methods that you develop as a sampler is a very valuable program. I always let people know, whenever I'm at an audit that a lot of the experiences that local program coordinators and staff members get is really valuable because there aren't many programs that do permitting, that do sampling, that do inspections, that do enforcement. If you think about it, throughout the environmental programs, whether you're at EPA or the state, there aren't many programs that all contain them into one program. So you guys are developing really good procedures and really good experiences that are really valuable to a lot of people. So continue on with that. But looking back at the procedures, okay. You are required to sample and inspect industrial users at least once per year. You're required to evaluate SIUs for slug discharge control. You're required to identify and locate all possible IUs. You're required to identify and the character and the volume of these pollutants and notify them of applicable pretreatment standards. So there's really two types of things that we're looking at here. The first 3 bullets have to do with inspections. The next ones have to do with gathering information and making evaluation. So let's talk about the inspections part of that first. Again, I'm always looking at guidance manuals. So the guidance manuals, will provide you information on inspections and sampling guidance, and sampling guidance. It'll give you information on how to control slug loadings. And, there's this last bullet has to do with other publications that we have. So there's really good information in these guidance manuals that, again, that you can use as your infrastructure. So for the industrial waste survey, this is an important piece of a pretreatment program. I believe that, and when I was a local pretreatment coordinator, so we had 2 cities and we had 23 outside contributing jurisdictions or sanitation districts. And so it was a commitment for us to go out and try to identify industrial users that are coming in and out of the service area and try to figure out resources and collaboration with other districts to try to determine what are their pollutants that you have. What is the character, what is the volume, and more importantly, what is the impact to your wastewater treatment plant? So this is always a continual process. When I go out and do audits, I have a practical perspective on this. I expect commitment, from the program, but I don't expect 100% of it to be current, because I know, again, there's that human element. Let's face it, sometimes you have a bad day, sometimes you have a low energy week. Sometimes things just don't work out professionally, so there's a lot of that going on. So the important piece about this industrial waste survey is that you have procedures, you have the resources, and you have the commitment, and you're moving forward with this and you're trying to identify. But again, when I first started doing inspections, what was really scary for me, and I'll be honest, was going into a industry user, knocking on a door, not having any idea what's behind it, and having what I called my opening spiel. Okay, so I always felt it was important for me to try to be as professional as possible, to ensure I have my credentials, and to let them know in like a 1-minute sort of narrative who I am, what do I do, and what am I here for? What's the purpose? Because, you know, the thing about pretreatment is that you can always understand the regulations, you can understand the science of it. What's hard for a lot of people to understand is the art of pretreatment, the art of engagement, the art of communication. You know, when I first started doing inspections, I remember I was so nervous. And remember, I worked for Littleton Englewood. I was so nervous going in there that I almost felt like I was walking on stumps because it was just new to me, you know, going in cold call and talking to this inspector at this industry. And so, you know, I always said, okay, I'm Al Garcia, I'm from Littleton Englewood, and here's my credentials. I work for pretreatment. Here's the purpose of my inspection. Got so nervous that instead of saying Littleton Englewood, I said, I'm from Littlewood. And, and all of a sudden I realized that, oh my gosh, I said the wrong thing, you know, but these are the humbling parts of pre-treatment program that you can laugh at afterwards, but you're horrified when you make these mistakes. But remember, it's okay, we're human. You know, not every first date, so to speak, not every first engagement that you have with someone is going to be perfect, but you still have a sense of humor, you still have a sense of perspective, and you still try to meet the mission of what you're trying to do. So after that, after those first couple months, I think, of doing inspections, I got a little bit better, you know, of at least getting over that opening spiel, so to speak, and then started getting more focused in on gathering information. So every time you go out and do an inspection, I've done many inspections now. I've always getting better at trying to be efficient at the opening part of it, you know, the engagement part of it, the communication, and then more importantly, gathering information. So it's very important that you gather information. So it could be done in a survey, it could be done in a drive-by inspection where you drive by a particular industry and you can tell what they do. They may be a restaurant. You know, a drive-by inspection will give you information that you may need. You may be able to get that through, like I mentioned, a paper survey. You may have to do an inspection. And so, you know, the inspection part of it, how you gather information is really important because you really want to get down to the industrial user inventory, where you start to develop this list of CIUs and SIUs in your service area. And I'll get to that in a couple slides. So, you know, there's no doubt about it. The industrial user inventory, very important. This gives you your base of information that you then develop your pre-treatment program and implement the procedures again. You know, you really want to characterize who's coming in and out of your service area. These are all the city departments that I worked with. You know, fire and police, code enforcement, these guys have boots on the ground. They can provide you information, sort of an indirect relationship. A direct relationship was with the building permits and the engineering programs, because they are the ones that will develop the plans, they'll develop the permits, you know, they'll develop the certificate of occupancy in order to start this business. The tax licenses and community development will give you some forewarning on who's planning on coming in. So these are really good relationships to develop. And I was always in City Hall, both at the City of Littleton and at the City of Englewood, trying to get this information continually from them. And Andrea, if there's any questions, you know, as we're going on, by all means, feel free to jump in, and I'd be happy to talk about some of these questions.
Yes, we'll do, Al. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so again, I talked about the industrial waste survey. I talked about the facility inspections. What's really important too is follow-up activities, because if we go back to, you know, to the regulations, again, you're required to identify industrial users, you're required to characterize them, and you're required to notify them of applicable pre-treatment standards. So follow-up activities is very important. You know, and that could determine whether or not you issue them a permit or institute best management practices for them. And I'll talk about that in a different slide down the road. So here's the, I'm not sure why I did it this way. I'm sorry about this. Let me go through this. So here's what you're trying to do with the industrial waste survey. You're trying to start to carve out your service area. Now, reflecting back on that map that I showed of your service area for the commercial and industrial side of it, you want to start carving out what type of industries are they? You know, so if you look on the right side, these are facilities where they may not have any pretreatment requirements, such as a Best Buy. You can drive by a Best Buy and say, okay, I know what they do. You know, you may have a leather company where you're not really quite sure if they're subject to leather and tanning. You may have to send them a survey, have a phone call to gather more information. McCormick Widgets, you may have to do an inspection of that facility to determine maybe they don't do metal finishing, maybe all they do is just machining. And in my local program, that's not significant to me, but I want to keep track of them for slug discharge control or spill plans. You may have to do sampling for the water in the bottle to determine, okay, they do have a discharge. It may be 2,000 gallons a day, but there's no pollutants of concern that I need to be worried about to implement pretreatment standards for. On the other side, you know, you may have a Burger King. Again, you're driving by it, you know it's a Burger King, and you know that they have to have a grease interceptor under best management practices. For Mike's Metals, based on your survey, you know, they may have a metal finishing, you know, based on the survey that you can start going there and develop a permit. Same thing with Duke's Trucking. Based on your inspection, they have trucking waste. They may you know, have interior container type of cleaning, which is subject to the transportation equipment and cleaning regulations. So through your inspection, you gather this information. Clayton's Ice Cream, you know, where they may make the best ice cream in the world, but then they also have bad batches. They have discharges of high BOD and TSS that you want to apply local limits to. So these are all the types of work that you're going through to develop, you know, carving out your service area. This doesn't happen in a week. This doesn't happen in a month. This happens by hard lessons. This happens by humbling nature. This happens by going in, talking to facilities, talking to your city departments, humbling yourself by saying the wrong statement, and then learning and progressing through your experience. You know, so you know, this is an ongoing effort because at the very bottom, you also have to maintain it. So based on this work that you're doing, okay, pretreatment standards, okay, this is the important part of a pretreatment program. So once you develop, once you characterize this facility, then you can start to determine what sort of pretreatment standards are they subject to. I always try to think of this as an onion. So the very top part of this onion is the EPA technology-based pretreatment categorical standards. We have about 58 of them. The latest one was the dental amalgam standards. And so these develop that uniform technology-based or process-based regulation that you can apply depending on what that facility does. The next one, equally important, are the general and specific prohibitions. Again, these are national. We have 8 of these, and these have different standards that you may apply for heat, for temperature, for obstructions. Truck to hauled waste is one of them. I would always say the most important one for your local community are local limits. These are site-specific local limits, and I'll talk a little bit about this in my next talk on Thursday. But local limits develop these site-specific standards for your wastewater treatment plant, your PHW, that are based on your current standards, that are based on current data of your service area, and develop an allocation that you can apply to the industry. So these are also really important. But you know, but really the way to develop and implement these standards is to understand that facility. So you know, this is the difference between categorical standards and local limits. I'll talk a little bit about that. You know, technology for or categorical, technical evaluation for local limits. And so you know, these are differences between the two standards. What's really important before you go into understanding these standards is to develop a good process. And again, you know, facility inspections is a part of pretreatment that you know, you bring that human element into it. Every inspection is different. Like I mentioned, I've done many inspections. Every inspection, I feel like I need to sort of change my perspective a little bit, maybe adapt to the way the conversations are going, maybe adapt to the bias I had going into this inspection. You know, there's that human element in it, you know, and so what really helps to make sure every inspection is consistent is this, what works for me. And I'm not saying this is in the regulations, but this is what works for me as far as doing inspections. I really want to ensure that I'm prepared to provide that ability for outreach to be in a good place where I can gather information, to be in a good place where I can have good conversation. So what really helps me is this process. Preparation is key. Whatever information I can get on that facility, whether that's, again, talking to my city departments, the community development, and getting an understanding of what this facility is, what do they do, it would be really important. Any drive-by inspections I may do, I may drive around the back to see if they have any waste coming out of the back. Any sort of preparation that you have is really important. For the SIU inspections that you have, the ones you have under permit, there's obviously a lot more records. There's a lot more information. There's DMRs, there's past inspections, there's the permit, there's a fact sheet or permit rationale. Whatever you can do to prepare for this is very important. In the inspection, again, I really want to try to provide that ability to communicate. So, I try to think about this for exposures, so I always want to get a couple different exposures to this facility. The opening conference is really important because that provides me that ability to go to a quiet place, to be able to, to maybe get outside of this inspection, just ask that person how they're doing, what do they do? How do they start this company? Because once you get them to talk about their industry, once you get them to get out of that sort of, there's no doubt about it, they're nervous too. If EPA comes in, especially if the city comes in to do an inspection, they're also kind of nervous too. So you want to try to engage them and get them to talk about things they're comfortable with before you start the inspection. So the opening conference is a way to communicate with them. The facility tour, so in the opening conference, I'll get the narrative of their process, and I'll always start from the raw materials and chemicals all the way to the finished product, whether that's a service, a garage, whether that's a very intense circuit board shop or metal finisher or pharmaceutical. I'll always start from the raw materials and work my way through. I'll get the narrative on that. I may not understand every single part that they're telling me, but I'll be able to verify and confirm that on the tour, because the tour is where you get the smells, where you get the sounds, where you get the visual aspect of this. The facility tour reinforces it. That's, again, my second exposure. When I'm on tour, I'll take pictures of relevant information, to be able to capture that information. I guarantee you a picture is worth 1,000 words or even more. I'll look at the records review to give me that additional exposure of the records. The closing conference is where I will then, preliminary, and always make sure that they know this is draft, this is preliminary. These are some of the observations that I had. The final will not come into the inspection report. So when I go back and do the inspection report, I'll download the pictures, I'll look at them again, another exposure. I will describe them, with text boxes or writing on the pictures, and then I'll put them in an inspection report where I'm now writing about it. So I've had like 4 or 5 different exposures of this one facility. By the time that inspection report is done, I pretty much know the facility, or I should, and then at that point, then I can go and see, okay, what are the pretreatment standards that apply? Do they have any processes or technology that's described by EPA and the pretreatment categorical standards? Are they subject to prohibitions? Are they subject to my local limits? Do I need to take sampling? That's the follow-up. That's really important.
Hey, Al,
So,
we have a
yes.
question
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
about inspections. Yeah. Someone was wondering if you can share an example of an initial inspection where the facility wasn't very pleased to be talking with you.
Yeah, sure. As cool as I think I am, no one wants government in their business. No one wants the so no one wakes up on a Monday morning and says, you know what, here's my week, I'm going to plan it out. Man, I hope government shows up. So I've been in inspections where people have been very pissed. They haven't been very happy because not only am I an annoyance, I'm really irritating to them for some reason. Again, I think I'm cool, but so there's a couple different levels on this. So I would say probably, if you're able to engage a facility, I would say maybe 90% of them understand it. You're still an annoyance, but they'll still continue with it, try to have humor behind it. There is a certain percentage that do not want you in there. So what you can do is try to, start to understand, again, the science of pretreatment, understand that you have that right of entry to be in their facility. Explain it to them as best as you can. Show them your credentials and explain the purpose of that. That may help them get, or that may help you get into the facility, so to speak. Other places, you also have to understand your right of entry as it pertains to warrants, as it pertains to, having additional help to get into the facility, because you do have that right of entry. It's not where you're forcing yourself in there, or you're trying to explain it, but you do have that ability to have the right of entry. Does that help, Andrea? Is there any follow-up questions to that?
Yeah, I think so. Did you have any examples to share that might be interesting for the audience?
Sure, yeah. So I was at this place, and it was in Little Sangwood, and it was on the far side of the service area. I drove about, maybe half an hour to get this facility. It was a cold day. I had slipped in the truck, so I really wasn't feeling it. And I got in, and this person came in, and he said, so I did my spiel, and I said what I am, and he slammed his hand on the desk and said, God damn it, I am tired. I've had the fire department here, I've had the health department here, and now I have you here, and I don't know what the hell you're doing here. And so it shocked me, and it's that initial visceral reaction that you have. And I just sat back and I just kind of let him just vent for a little bit, and then he went on for like half a minute, and then I just very calmly, and it wasn't that easy. Again, human element in it. You have reactions to emotions and things that occur in your life, and I just said very calmly, I said, okay, I appreciate it. Are you willing to have this inspection now? And he said, yeah. And he went forward. He just wanted to vent for a while, and we went in there, and it was a facility where they were a machine shop that had a vapor degreaser. So I convinced him that, hey, here's your liability to the environment to be continued with this vapor degreaser. If you can find a substitution for this, then this will help you get out of regulations. So I think at the end, it helped him to understand that there is maybe, I'm still an annoyance, but I'm able to provide him that ability to understand his liability. So one aspect, I guess, which is good, and that this question came up, is that I always speak the language of liability to industries when I'm in there. They don't really give a hoot about this regulation or that regulation. What they care about is that, what does it mean to me? What it means to them in most instances is money and liability. Okay, so here's your exposure to this particular aspect of the pre-treatment program, and here's what you do. Here's what you can do to eliminate it or minimize it. So we talk about spills, we talked about slug discharges. They may be able to substitute chemicals, they may be able to institute measures that may be a cost, but it may minimize the big cost of having this enforcement case come against them. So always try to identify what is their exposure, what is their risk, and what can they do to minimize their liability to that exposure.
Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. It
Sure.
was very valuable.
Sure. So every service area is different. And so, these are the ones that may or may not apply to your service area, depending on the size of your collection system and your wastewater treatment plant. So there's a variety of SIUs that can occur in your service area. So what you want to start doing is figuring out, okay, are these subject to my local limits? And what is my control mechanism for these? Do I have to issue them permits? Can I control them through best management practices, and then start to evaluate their compliance with the pre-treatment regulations that you employ in your service area. And by the way, so for those of you that have microbreweries that you're controlling in your service area, if you need anyone to sample, let me know. I'm your man. I'll be there the next week, happy with my growler to sample any of these microbreweries. So as I mentioned, here's how you start to parse out your service area. At the very top is the universe of industrial users. And then as you go to the left, there's SIUs under permit. They could be categorical industrial users subject to pre-treatment categorical standards, or they could be subject to your local limits, or a combination of both on the left side. On the right side, you'll have non-significant industrial users where they may be under BMPs, best management practices under the sector control program, or they may be not significant, or as we used to call them, dry. They may be just like a dress shop where there's no wastewater discharge. You want to start to parse out your industries to this. Sampling. So sampling, again, that is something that is very humbling, and there is a lot of preparation and adaptation to sampling. Here's some regulations I'll throw at you. So you're required to carry out inspections, surveys, monitoring. You're required to surveil them. To gather information independent of what they provide you in the self-monitoring report or in their own individual sampling to ensure compliance and determine compliance or non-compliance with applicable pretreatment standards. So trust but verify. Ensure that your permit is concise. Ensure that your permit is very clean. It has a good background to the regulations, and you're able to go out and gather information from inspections or sampling. You're required to sample them and inspect them at least once a year, which is basically this one out of 403.8 F25. These seem like really simple regulations. There's a lot behind it. I've learned through, things happen. It's different sampling in summer versus the winter here in Colorado. It gets pretty cold in the winter, and I've learned that when I have an automatic sampler, to ensure that the sampling van is heated up, and I put the hose on the vent of the sampling truck, or keep it in the room, because once you go out there, once it freezes up, it's like a rock, and you cannot. It's not a flexible hose anymore. It's very difficult to put it into the type of place where you want to sample. So I've learned that sometimes when you put in a sampler, hit the start button, because there's nothing worse when you have to climb down a 10-foot manhole under confined space entry, put the sampler in the right location, put the low flow probe in the flow, and then come back the next day and try to lift it up, and all of a sudden it's empty. You realize that you forgot to hit the start button. There is nothing more humbling than that, and it's the worst feeling in the world. I've learned that when you're sampling, always try to be the one pulling it up instead of the one at the bottom, because you don't want that sampler allegedly to overspill onto your body. There's nothing worse than that. I've learned to ensure that the sampler is correctly chained onto the iron. So we used to have these crosses that we put on top of the manhole to ensure that these crosses are appropriately located on the top of the manhole, so they don't slip down and have the sampler clog the collection line, because there's nothing worse than wastewater starting to rise up this 20-foot manhole and having to call collection system to come and help you because you're scared you're going to create a sanitary sewer overflow. These are the type of things that happen. Sampling plans are great, but again, there's a human element involved in everything. You don't want to be that person trying to pull up a manhole when it's raining and you're on your stomach with your hand reaching into the manhole, trying desperately to hold on to the sampler hanger, because you're afraid that you're going to drop it and it's raining on you. And there's nothing more miserable than being on a Friday at 3 o'clock trying to lift up a sampler out of a manhole. Those things happen, and I don't know how they happen, but they tend to happen. And sampling plans will help you to try to minimize that. So sampling plans are part of that. When you go out and implement the program, you're always learning something new. Try to document that. Try to update your sampling plans to address these things that may occur out into the service area. So what I like to see in sampling plans is that overview of sampling, the QA, QC. You want to make sure that your samples are defensible. You want to make sure that they're in control, both in the field. If you use trip blanks or duplicates, you want to make sure that that's in control. Your sampling methods are appropriate and consistent. And you want to make sure the analytical methods are also in control too. So sampling plans should include QA, QC to help with that. Have a scheme, a plan in order to consistently have data that you can defend and stand up against. And when you're going out to sampling locations, you want to make sure that the samples the sampling protocols, the methods are site specific. Because again, as I mentioned, you may be sampling out of a stopcock valve and taking 4 aliquots every 2 hours for an 8-hour continuous monitoring, or you may have flow proportional sampling where you got to have a primary flow monitoring device, and you got to have it actuated by a certain type of flow that you got to program in. Ensure that you have sampling protocols. So when you go out there, you're consistent. If someone, and God help you, if I was able to go out there and try to address your sampling, could I, or someone new be able to implement your sampling based on your site-specific sampling protocols? Those are important because I guarantee you, when you enforce, that's when you'll get challenged. And you don't want to be that person up on court asking questions about calibration, asking questions about consistency of your sampling. You want to make sure you have all that documented to the best of your ability. But again, things change all the time. Keep that focus and priority on maintaining those sampling plans.
Hey, Al, we have 2 questions for you before you move on to BMPs. The first is about sampling. Someone asked what analyses you sample for at microbreweries. And the second is a question about taking pictures at a facility where they have some proprietary concerns or they don't want you to take photos. They're wondering how you handle that situation.
Okay, so let me address the microbreweries first. So we're talking about happy hours, or we're talking about sampling for a permit?
Probably the permit, but we'd love to hear both.
Okay, all right. So my favorite beer are ambers, the fall beers, the Marsens and the Doppelbock. So that's what I sample personally when I'm at happy hours. When I was at a local program, we started looking at microbreweries, and there's no doubt about it. High and low pH is a concern. There's use of acids and CIPs of these tanks. There's also solids. There's high strength waste. So I gave a webinar 2 weeks ago with Jay Pemper. We were talking about high strength wastes. And so depending on their housekeeping, depending on their best management practices inside their facility for the brewing processes, they can discharge yeast, they can discharge high strength waste, they can discharge, BOD, COD, they can discharge suspended solids. All those are a concern. And what's really difficult about microbreweries, especially the smaller ones, the nanobreweries, they're high strength, but they're low volume. So what does that mean to your pre-treat program? Again, going back, understanding what your design capacities are and understanding, are they significant? But I'll typically sample for pH. I'll typically sample for BOD or COD. I'll typically sample for total suspended solids. And then make determinations on those. A lot of times you can establish BMPs to have them take out their solids, to be able to side stream some of their high strength waste to use, beneficially, as opposed to discharging that as a waste down the drain. So those are all things that you can determine. But the very first key is to identify what is the loading coming out of the plant. Remind me, Andrea, on the second question.
Yeah, of course. Someone asked about taking pictures at a facility that doesn't want you to take pictures because of proprietary reasons or whatnot, and
Okay.
They just want to know how you handle the situation when you get in that kind of scenario.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about forgetting that second question. I got so excited about beer. So the very first thing to keep in mind is that, the legal authority is important. And so what I recommend, and it's not a requirement of the pre-treatment program, but what I recommend strongly is that you adopt this in your ordinance or your rules and regulations, the ability to take pictures under the right of entry. So picture taken should be a form of gathering data. So make sure you have that infrastructure, that authority in the first place. So if you're challenged, you have that. Okay. There's no doubt about it. A lot of times when you gather information, it doesn't matter what type of information. It's a confidentiality issue sometimes. So I had an inspection again back when I was local. At this defense contractor, and the inspections lasted over 2 years. There was like over 150 different buildings that I went to, and I tried to knock off like 5 of those at a time. They made rockets, and so a lot of these were confidential. What this facility tried to do is say everything in our fence is confidential. I'm like, no, no, no. There's some things that you do that are common. There's certainly things that are proprietary and patent pending, but there's things that you do, such as metal finishing, machining, that is common throughout the industry. So I made sure that the pictures that I took, first of all, were responsible. I didn't take pictures of the rockets. I took pictures of the metal finishing tank. I took pictures of the metal finishing pipe, and I worked out an arrangement with them for them to also QA/QC these pictures to make sure that it meets their confidentiality concerns, and it also provided us information that we needed in order to determine whether or not we need to have a spill plan, a slug discharge control plan, or a permit. So again, it's that engagement, it's that exploring, it's that understanding of the regulations, while also still collaborating with them and working with them to make sure they feel comfortable.
Excellent. We had another question pop up if you'd like to take it.
Sure.
Yeah. So the question reads, if you don't have local limits for BOD, COD, and TSS, from a brewery, what are you going to look for that might be an indicator, a red flag to let you know that you should sample?
Okay.
That there might be some high strength waste coming from them.
Sure. So the first thing I'd recommend is, I know there's a lot of surcharging for many cities, and that's a great thing. So the whole idea of surcharging is to have them pay for the additional treatment for these high strength wastes, typically BOD and TSS at your wastewater treatment plant. But what I ask cities is, how many people know what is their ceiling? What is that allocation limit on that you need to determine that will start to impact your plant? Again, interference and pass through. So if you surcharge at anything over high, so typically what I see is that anything over normal domestic strength of BOD, TSS above 300 or 250, depending on your city, will be surcharged. But then there's no ceiling on that. So the first thing I would say is for every city to understand your design capacity, understand your allocation, that ceiling, that now all of a sudden, instead of being a surcharge issue, it's now a concern about violation issue. So first, understand that. And every city's different. In Metro Denver, they probably don't have a ceiling because they're so big. But for smaller cities, that's very important. So that's the first thing. If you don't have local limits, and if you're a larger city, what I would be concerned about are obstructions because of solids. I would be concerned about corrosion because of pH. And those are, those two are the ones where we had some, some real concerns about corrosion in the lift station or corrosion of the manholes downstream of that brewery. And then also the potential of solids to be in the collection system, because that's a maintenance issue for jet cleaning and the sewer system. Is there anything else?
Is there, just to, I guess, add to that, so I guess how would you go about, if you're going to, there were assumptions, but is there anything specifically to look for, maybe downstream? I think they're asking, I guess, corrosion in the pipe or solids in the line, but beyond that.
Yeah, so yeah, that's also good perspective. We dealt with our collection system in that service area, and this was the collections department, I'm sorry, this was an outside contributing jurisdiction, so it was very difficult to get to get that collection system, collection department to do downstream inspections. But that was part of our evaluation, was to have through video, was to have through evaluations by a different department. What is the impact of that facility? Because back then, when this is the early 2000s, we didn't really know what was that volume of high and low pH. We knew that there was a low pH coming out at certain times from this brewery, but we didn't know what the impact of that was. So we developed this relationship with the collection department to do those inspections and determine, okay, what is truly the impact of this? Because without that information, we really didn't have any sort of information to move forward with. Does that help, Andrew?
Excellent. Yeah, I think so. I think you really answered the question well. Thank you.
Okay. So I know I'm coming up against times. This is some of my last slides. So, the other
Okay.
part of the field considerations are best management practices. Um, there's a lot of smaller programs where oil and grease is a big issue. And there's, I this is always really important to us that we have four principles, we have four components of any sector control program. And actually for the dental amalgam rule, this is the perspective I came into when I was on that work group for the dental amalgam rule. But really what makes these very successful are these four elements. One is to ensure treatment technology is installed, ensure that treatment technology is adequately sized. They are, not any treatment runs by itself. So there's an operation and maintenance issue with treatment technology, and there's also record keeping to ensure that you're accountable. So if we're talking about fog, the treatment technology are grease interceptors. They're sized to the type of restaurant, whether that's a Chinese restaurant or a donut shop or a coffee shop or a Mexican restaurant. They have to operate and maintain it as appropriate to the type of facility that they have, and they keep records. This is, I've opened a manholes where, I pretty much have been able to walk on top of that. Not that I would, but I've been able to walk on top of it because it's so caked in. The operation and maintenance of this is always an important part of it, and so trying to get restaurants, and we all know restaurants where the manager is like an 18-year-old with acne and they change out every 3 months, trying to get them to understand the program has always been a challenge. And the other thing I realized with FOG programs is that in many situations, the grease interceptor is located in the drive-through. So, and it's always at lunchtime when we go out, to do I learned to go out early the first time, when I do these restaurants, but there's nothing worse than having a drive-through be the location of the grease interceptor, because now you're holding up economics and everyone's honking at you and they're hungry and they're mad, and so just keep that in mind. Identify where these grease interceptors are, understand what size they are, and then understand what sort of operation and maintenance they need to have in order to maintain that appropriately, because these will impact your collection system, cause obstructions. So the dental amalgam, what's the treatment technology? An amalgam separator. It needs to be sized to the type of chairs that discharge to it and the volume of amalgam that goes to it. There's operation and maintenance requirements in the dental rule, and there's record keeping requirements. So these are the type of things that I learned from a local program that I brought to the dental amalgam rule. But every sector control program is also very important because there's a lot of lessons with that too. There's nothing, it's always fun to try. And I used to have a contest that whenever I popped open a manhole, I tried to get it back in like one swoop. But many times it would always be off center and I'd always be trying to hop on it. And that was always a failure for me whenever I couldn't put it back into place. I got pretty good at that actually with the manhole slinging, but I'm sure I probably lost that skill. Every PHW shall have sufficient resources and qualified personnel. Just keep that in mind, is that, the pre-treatment program, again, human element on it, there's different layers of it, there's different skills. Do your best to try to capture as much experience you have, hard lessons, humbling lessons, have a sense of humor on it, understand there's a human element to this. And that's what I have. If anyone has any additional questions, I know I'm kind of up past the time.
We do have one additional question. Oh, no, it's just a housekeeping. So we had a question about your presentation and if we're going to make the slides available. And we will add these presentations to our website after the workshop is completed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate the time and the ability to be able to talk to y'all. I hope you guys have a great week.
This is Carissa, another moderator with Andrea. And thank you, Al. We really appreciate you presenting for our group today, and we look forward to seeing part 2 from you on Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, folks. We, as part of our CEU requirement, as Andrea mentioned in the beginning, we will be showing a poll right now as related to Al's presentation. So please take this. The polls are open for 45 seconds. And then we will close it and the results will be shown, and then we'll move on to our next presentation. And if you're having trouble being able to enter the poll, choose your middle minimize option and don't be in full screen. We've had some folks mention that to us. And so if you're struggling with that, please try that option. And another option is also to, if you're still having trouble, we will write to us right now in the chat and we'll make sure that you are registered for that CEU for this hour. Okay, let's close the poll. And here are the results. Thank you, everyone.
And I think we have a second poll to perform. I'll give you a minute or two to take this poll as well. Okay, thank you everyone for participating in these polls. Now we are gearing up to have Stephanie Kearns with the City of Newport.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
We can, Stephanie, yes.
Yay, okay. Sometimes my computer has issues, so if I can't be heard or it gets frozen, let me know.
Yes, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and I think you've been given permission to share your screen.
Okay.
And once it pops up on my screen, I'll let you know. Okay.
All right.
All right, we can see it and we'll just let you. Yep.
Okay. All right, well, good morning, everybody.
And Stephanie,
so as, yes.
Stephanie, I apologize. I meant to ask you, would you like questions in real time or you want us to save them for a Q&A at the end?
You know, I said Q&A at the end, but it probably wouldn't hurt at real time just because we'll see if this is a whole hour. So.
Sure. Okay, well, thanks.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. As mentioned, my name is Stephanie Kearns, and I work for the City of Newport, which is located in the Central Oregon coast, and I'm the Environmental Compliance Specialist for the city. And this is working towards compliance, permitting a large brewery while establishing a new pretreatment program. So kind of a good segue from some questions from Al's presentation. Just to make that title a little longer, is it's also for a small community. I just didn't put that in there. So a little bit of background about Newport, Oregon is that we have a population of 10,000 residents full-time. But we are a big tourist destination, and so that population grows to about 30 to 40,000 people in the summer months. So we get a lot larger then. Because of that kind of dynamic, we have some unique wastewater flow characteristics. Specifically in the winter, due to it being rainy season, we have high flow but low loading because that's when we have the least amount of people in town, so about the 10,000. So low organic loading. And then in the summer months, with it being dry season, it's low flow, and then we have high organic loading with tripling or quadrupling our population. So it kind of makes for interesting wastewater treatment plant operations. So our main industries in town, obviously, as mentioned, is tourism. We have about 125 restaurants, which is a lot of restaurants for a little town. And for fishing and fish processing, we have large commercial fishing that have a variety of different types of fish. And then we have 2 very large fish processing plants, but they are not connected to the city system. They actually have their own discharge permits into the Yaquina Bay through DEQ. And then we have a couple of small fish processing plants that are pop-up plants, so they only they only work when the season for that fish is in, and a fish meal plant, they are connected to our system. And then we do have breweries, specifically one very large brewery, which is Rogue Spirits and Ales, and then we have 2 smaller kind of local microbreweries that don't distribute outside their own restaurants and brew pubs. And then we also have a covered landfill, and that leachate comes straight into our wastewater system instead of being hauled in. So as I mentioned, Rogue Spirits and Ales is the largest industry that is connected to the sewer system. And as of 2017, this may be a little different. They were the 4th largest microbrewery in the state of Oregon, and they produce about 100,000 31-gallon barrels per year, give or take some. It depends on the year. And they do all their bottling on site. And they did in, I believe, 2017, start the Rogue Spirits Distillery. So they have another kind of little system that they put in. And really did not have any full wastewater pretreatment system until 2020. And that's kind of what this whole situation is about. So there is kind of a longish history with Rogue in the city. So Rogue was never regulated by the city. Periodically we would check in, but they didn't have to do anything. So starting in 2017, we had a big personnel change here in the city, and it really became apparent that the wastewater treatment plant was at max oxygen demand for treating the organic loading in the summertime when we had 40,000 plus people and everything running full swing. We were still able to meet the NPDES permit limitations. We weren't out of permit with DEQ, but they were at max. So there is no room for growth, which is a dangerous place to be in for a city. So really we had 2 main courses of actions that they had to do. And that was either start designing and planning to expand the wastewater treatment plant, which comes with a really hefty price tag, or investigate industrial use. And kind of the fiscally obvious answer is to investigate industrial use, especially if we have a significant industrial user and we are then responsible for maintaining a pretreatment program. So right away, Rogue was identified as a main source of organic loading. Just as they mentioned, historically, people have realized that microbreweries have such high strength waste. And there has also been times in the past where they have killed our wastewater treatment plant with extremely low pH discharges. Like our influent was coming in at a 4. So I think that even before we started monitoring them, it was pretty obvious like who was the main character or actor in that. Rogue, so the city required Rogue to install monitoring, and this consisted of pH with an inflow pH probe, temperature, flow, and a composite sampler for VOD testing. This is city owned and operated, even though they had to deal with the cost of building it, and is used as a compliance point. So this monitoring revealed that they had a pH range of 2.0 to 14.0, which is essentially the entire pH scale. They were discharging temperatures as high as 156 degrees Fahrenheit. Their average flow was about 30,000 gallons per day. That range was about 15,000 to 45,000 gallons per day. That's actually up lately. They've been getting up to over 50,000. So with the VOD testing, the average VOD was about 3,000 milligrams per liter, and they got commonly as high as 5,000 milligrams per liter, and that, they're sending 1,000 to 3,000 pounds of organic loading to the treatment plant on a daily basis. So obviously they are a significant industrial user per that. And so continuing that history, so from that collection, the data that we collected from them, really they found that the Rogue VOD counts for about 50 to 60% of the wastewater treatment plant's organic loading in the winter months, and about 15 to 25% during the summer months. And so that triggered, we have a significant industrial user, we have to have a pretreatment program. Also, just the basic, even with paying extra strength charges, they do not pay 50% of the wastewater charges for the city. So in August of 2017, Rogue was issued a notice of violation and given compliance deadlines that kind of varied in timeline, with the most recent being pH and then TSS, and then the longest kind of deadline was put out for BOD, because that takes a little bit more time to build a system that can handle that. So the BOD and pH requirements were based off of city code and not anything else, which was a pH range of 5.5 to 9 and a BOD of 300 milligrams per liter. And we did recognize that that BOD limitation was very low. It's just, especially for an industry trying to treat that. But really what happened was no deadlines were met. And in fact, they ended up discharging a massive amount of low, like acidic pH, and they killed our wastewater treatment plant. They actually killed our biological treatment system. And so they received a cease and desist, which would result in their water being shut off, regarding pH and temperature discharges, because around that same time they had put in their distillery and they discharged boiling hot water that melted our pipes, the city pipes. So we had some collection issues and we had some major treatment issues, and that was kind of, I think, the breaking point of they were ignoring our requests and then they were causing direct issues with the city. So they did install a temporary pH stabilization tank. It worked a little bit. They didn't have quite the huge swing. Their range was still about 4.0 to 12, but when they first installed it, they didn't add any oxygen and it went septic. So that was another issue. So really the main problem was that they had their brewery operators trying to be wastewater treatment engineers, and it just didn't work. And as I mentioned, they qualify as a significant industrial user, and per state and fed requirements, we now must administer a pretreatment program. So in 2018, the city hires a consultant, which was Brown and Caldwell, to assist with program development. They helped administer the industrial user survey, as well as the permit writing for Rogue and doing the sampling analysis plan and kind of any program development as needed. So with the city, which I'll explain a little bit later, we did decide prioritizing getting Rogue an industrial user permit over getting our program administered or officially approved. So they had to create a new position, which was me, the environmental compliance specialist. This is brand new to the city, so I was hired early 2019. And with that, we did a kind of another control mechanism, because our notice of violations and they only respond to cease and desist, we decided to go through with administering fines. And so from about the end of 2018 to April 2019, they were only getting $500 a day per violation for grab and composite pH. And the reason for this is they installed that monitoring system that was city owned and operated, but we didn't have the personnel or the time to actually maintain that sampler. So the pH probe was not giving reliable data because it wasn't cleaned or calibrated enough. So when I was hired, I was able to start doing that so we could actually have reliable data. So then they did start getting daily fines based off of those pH probe readings. And that went on for a few months. And then starting in July of 2019, we started issuing $500 a day for BOD violations. And the $500 was based off of our city code. We can only work within what we have. So yeah, we started doing that, and that got tacked on to their water bill. They were called administration fines. And so then in August, we did finally issue them a wastewater discharge permit. And to now, so we updated their fining amount to $1,000 per day per violation for pH, TSS, and BOD. And kind of to go into the permitting process. So our city code allows for special permits under the Public Director's authority. So that's kind of how we were able to like give them an industrial user permit essentially before we had a formal pretreatment program. We did use Bend, Oregon's brewery permits as templates. If you don't know, Bend, Oregon has a very large amount of microbreweries and a pretty successful pretreatment program, so it was a good kind of starting point for us as far as BMPs and different stuff. And so what we did that Bend didn't do is we have technically based limits of ceiling limits for BOD. Obviously, they have very high strength loading. So our BOD maximum limits daily went up to 22 milligrams per liter, about 500 pounds per day. These were based off of our plant and what we can handle and flow and all of that, and during our peak season, which was the summer months. And then with a weekly average of 1,900 milligrams per liter or 450 pounds, we did the weekly average lower just to kind of like keep them honest, right? To keep them from constantly, doing the minimum treatment required to reach their permit limitations. For pH, we expanded the pH range from 6.0 to 10 because our treatment plant could handle a little higher pH better than it can handle a lower pH. And TSS had a daily max and a weekly average. There's one and the same of 1,000 milligrams per liter. And then a temperature limitation of 104 degrees Fahrenheit at entrance into the city system. And so it also came with self-monitoring reports, and which we're doing monthly monitoring reports right now, and notification requirements for spills, slug discharges, and so that we know what's coming, because we've never had that with them. We would just wake up or start a day and there'd be issues and we wouldn't know. So with that, we increased the fines to $1,000 per day from the $500, just because that's also what's required for industrial user permits with a pretreatment program. So we really treated this permit as a significant industrial user permit. And the main reason is that when we have our pretreatment program approved, it'll help with a smoother transition instead of having to go through this process again. So that was kind of the main goal. So we issued this permit in August of 2019. And surprise, surprise, we've got major pushback from Rogue. They refused to sign the permit, but within city code, it was issued and signed by a public works director, so it was an actual legitimate permit. And they also refused to recognize any of the limitations, and they didn't pay any of their fines. And so it was used, but they definitely threw a lawyer at it and tried to get out of everything, and kind of ironically still missed the 30-day deadline to like actually issue any permit changes, but they did try. So kind of moving forward is, as it sounds like everything's terrible, I promise there has been a lot of things have gotten better. But right away, Rogue did hire lab technicians to do in-house testing for their wastewater to test for BOD, and they did finally hire some engineers per city request because we needed engineering plans for their pretreatment system. That was per our permit. So they did submit engineering plans for their system back in October of 2019. The first and foremost, there was a lot of technical and logistical concerns. At the time, they had bought a pre-made treatment system from a vendor, and it wasn't a system that was designed to meet their wastewater characteristics. It was just like a standard run-of-the-mill system. And, they didn't have the required storage capacity. So kind of have some back and forth, but they officially got approved for November of 2019, and it was only for pH. So it had a pH stabilization tank and system, and then they had a polymer and coagulant addition and a screw press to help take out some solids. So obviously, if anybody kind of understands wastewater treatment, that does nothing for BOD treatment for brewery waste, because a lot of it is high strength loading that is dissolved. It's not actually in like a solid form, so you need biological treatment to take it out. But they did proceed with this because we can't really tell them what to do or how to do, or we can't tell them how to do what they need to do. So we just have to kind of like, it works. So they put the system online in January 2020, and it works. they went from having, 60% of their flow being out of compliance to 20%. And so for pH, and so it was better. Definitely their range was a lot lower than it used to be. They didn't have such a wide spread of pH discharges. So they did install a BOD pretreatment system in September of 2020, and I will explain kind of how that came about in a second. But they're still optimizing that system because they are putting in biological treatment, and it just takes a while to get that really optimized and to kind of go through the pilot testing for that. They finally hired a legitimate wastewater consultant, as well as having an engineering firm on staff, and they're kind of doing all the things that really should have been done at the beginning, which is characterizing their wastewater flow and figuring out what system they need in order to meet their permit standards. And kind of a cool thing recently is they are receiving free technical assistance through a PPRC EPA grant that is helping small communities with large breweries kind of get them technical assistance to reduce their organic loading. So it's through us, but not through us, like we're kind of hands off. But it's a good thing because they're getting kind of the expertise they need in order to be successful. So really how we got them to get the BOD pretreatment and to really start, honing in their pretreatment system is that, they built up enough fines over like about an 8-month period where they didn't pay them. They were blowing through deadlines, and it was either we're going to shut your water off or we need to do something because they're just not, they're just being a very difficult industry. And so we did offer to come into a consent agreement with them, and this is a legally binding agreement. They set their own deadlines as far as when they think they can come into compliance, and it really came in to having 3 main conditions, with 5 consecutive days of pH compliance, 5 consecutive days of BOD compliance, and 5 consecutive days of TSF compliance. And they met them just barely, but they did meet all 3 conditions, so they didn't fail the consent agreement, and they weren't at that time kind of getting any fines from the city. But, they still are violating the permit. They aren't there 100%. And, on top of that, we have some issues with kind of public opinion. Rogue does not have a great reputation in the city for following rules, not even just with wastewater, just a bunch of other stuff. So we kind of have some community watchdogs that are very involved and constantly doing FOIA requests and getting information of what Rogue is up to and where the city's at. So we definitely had to deal with a lot of public opinion issues to the outsider who doesn't understand the cost of putting in a pretreatment system and maintaining it and doing everything that they're required to do. It looks like the city's rolling over. Like they built up all these fines, they didn't have to pay them, they went into a consent agreement, and and I'm sure many people can agree with this, but at the end of the day, we want them to succeed. We want them to be in compliance. We're not here to make money off of them. So I think that that's been kind of a struggle, kind of finding that balance of why we're doing what we're doing. So where we're at right now. Oh, yeah.
Hey, Stephanie. Yeah, we have a quick question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there are actually 2. So the first was from earlier. Someone missed the intro, and they were wondering if your system is a combined system with sewer and storm, or is it just sewer only?
It's just sewer only. Yeah, we have a little bit of I&I issues, though that's been drastically reduced with some updates. But yeah, we just mostly have a wastewater, which is good.
Yeah.
If we combined, it would be a nightmare.
On the East Coast, you have a lot more combined, but out here in Oregon and Washington, you don't see that as much. But and then the second question, someone wanted you to explain a little bit more on why you couldn't tell the brewery exactly how to treat the discharge properly.
Yeah, so that's kind of being in the regulator aspect, right? So I can't go into an industry who's putting in a pretreatment system and say, you need to use this system, because then it looks like I'm promoting like a private industry, right? Like as a government employee, I cannot show preference to any private industry, whether that's someone who's designing a pretreatment system designer or a engineering firm or any of that. So we can tell them you need to meet these limitations and you need to have, you know, this, you need to have 15,000 gallons worth of storage, you need to have this for pH, but we cannot legally tell them you need to have a biological, you know, trickling filter system, right? Like we can't do that because it's a kind of a weird like legal issue, if that makes any sense. Like we can't tell them what to get. And that's kind of a blanket thing for everything from the city. So we can always say, you need to do this, you may need this, but I can't tell you how to do it. Kind of a weird world.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and not to mention,
Yeah.
if it doesn't treat it properly, then they can come back to you and said, well, this is what you said that we needed to do. And there was a
Yeah.
follow-up question to about Rogue, and we were wondering if someone was wondering if you could share a little bit more about why they're not really seen as a community partner. What other things have they done to give them not a bad reputation within the community, if you can share?
Yeah. So they also have, because they're really big and they have this big, you know, they have a couple of restaurants in town and they have like an Airbnb experience. And so what they did is they haven't been paying city taxes. And so they went to actual court about that, and they really fought paying these city taxes within like Airbnb stuff because we had some new rule change. And they just kind of, I mean, their name is the Rogue. And that is their whole thing, is that they are like the Rogues. They do their own stuff and they just don't really follow a lot of rules. And so it's just within the community, especially Newport, just a little background, is a very environmental first community, which is great for my job. But because of that, you know, they just don't have a good reputation of caring about stuff. And I mean, I haven't lived here, you know, long enough to really dive deep into it, but I do know that it was mostly because they got out of paying a lot of money when they should have. That goes back into the community, right? The whole point of those taxes is to go back into community development. So I think that's kind of the main source. And, you know, small towns, there's always favorites and non-favorites. So it's kind of all I know about that. But yeah, that's kind of where Rogue is. Not the greatest reputation, and they have a big turnover rate, and I think there's just some long history with that. So,
Thanks, Stephanie.
yeah.
We'll let you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I was saying with the consent agreement, we're in the possibility of going into another consent agreement. So the ironic part is they were supposed to set their own deadlines, and we were just going to accept them, and they set them very soon. I mean, it started in August 2020, and they said by October 1st, they would meet these deadlines, and they did, but they're still in violation. I mean, still 5 to 10% of their flow is out of compliance for pH. You know, 25% of their BOD results are pretty out of compliance. And so we're kind of in this time where they have all the right consultants, they're doing all the right things, but they're just not there yet. So we're thinking about, you know, kind of going into another consent agreement with a little longer term while they pilot test their new biological system. And so they're not getting, you know, 10 to 20,000 worth of fines a week, because that is kind of where they're at. And so that's kind of what's happening with Rogue. It's like I said, this is kind of like a case study / in the trenches, what's happening. So to kind of circle it back to our actual pretreatment program, we did complete our industrial user survey. And surprise, surprise, it showed that we had a significant industrial user of Rogue. So our local limits testing is set to occur in 2021. It was supposed to happen this summer, but due to some staffing issues, I can only do so much by myself. I'm one person. And COVID-19, as many cities have found, that we are having some budget shortfalls, so we lost some funding for a lot of our wastewater stuff. So we're hoping to get this done next year, and that will help kind of identify any other pollutants of concern with other smaller industries that we may or may not have. So currently working on updating the city code and in creating an enforcement action plan. So for the code, I'm currently working on that right now, and I'm using the EPA model ordinance for that, which is a fantastic tool for starting. And I'm doing it in-house, and that was kind of a personal preference of me because I am the one that will administer this program, and I truly believe that like writing and editing and, you know, toning, getting this code correct will help me be better at my job. And so our goal is to have this sent to DEQ for conditional approval by the end of the year and have program finalized in the spring of 2021. So to give a little background of like the process for this, I'm sure someone's gone over it, but I'll go over it, is that for any official documentation for pretreatment program approval, we send it for like the code and the enforcement action plan. We send it to DEQ for conditional approval. So they say it looks good, it meets all the requirements, and then it comes back to us, and then we do a 30-day public comment period, and then implement anything that needs to be implemented from those comments. And then it goes to our city council, and they approve the code, and then they like sign an official letter, and we send it back to DEQ, and they say, okay, everything looks good. It's officially put into their code, municipal code, and now you have a formal program. So we're hoping to get that started soon. Like I said, I'm about 80% done with the city code, and the enforcement action plan is kind of building itself, kind of to circle back to Rogue. So with the end of the last consent agreement, the administration fines didn't work that was attached. They just refused to pay them, and they were able to like legally get out of them. So now we're going through the municipal court process and issuing citations. And so because of that, I'm working really closely with our city attorney and making sure that everything that we do can like legally stand up in court. And so it's kind of nice that I'm in the process of dealing with this. We are also building our enforcement action plan. So those two things are happening right now, and I'm hoping to get that done as soon as possible. And once approved, a couple of things. One, we have some actual teeth, because right now we're kind of scrambling around our current city code and like trying to find a way to enforce certain things. And it takes a lot of time and bandwidth. And so having an actual pretreatment program, it's like a single reference, really straightforward. And then also we have some categorical users. We have some smaller breweries. We have, like I said, those pop-up fish processing plants. We've got an asphalt plant, a cement plant. And we just have some other industries that I haven't had the time to even look into because we're just so caught up in the one large user. So that's kind of where we're at. I was hoping to be further along at this point, but you know, it's 2020. So the biggest lessons and advice I have so far is, especially for small communities, do your industrial pretreatment surveys. I know they're required, at least they are for most people, but some smaller communities have been able to get away with not doing them, and that is exactly what happened with Newport, is that, you know, this was before I was here and a lot of other people, but they didn't ask any questions, and Rogue went through 5 very large expansions without ever once having the city being involved outside of, you know, the building permitting. So, you know, it's time consuming, and especially for small communities, but it's so vital because then you'll kind of know what's going on, and you can work with those industries who are either coming into your community or who are expanding, and you can kind of keep track of what's happening. And if they are going to trigger you to have a pretreatment program, you could do that. And even if you don't need a pretreatment program, if they're starting to affect your plant, you have that connection and you kind of know what's going on. For me, keeping all of your upper management and like final decision makers within your city in the loop. So that's public works director, the city manager, city attorney, and city council for me. You know, from the beginning, we have been really open communication and keeping everyone kind of up to date of what's happening, because you don't want it to be taken by surprise. And as I mentioned, we have some community watchdogs watching this situation with Rogue. So city council, I mean, there's a lot of public comment, and so you don't want them to come into a city council meeting and be totally caught in by surprise and they don't know anything of this. So that's been a good thing, and then we're all on the same page, and then they're on my side as well. So when things kind of go south, I have some help. And also check what you can do within your current municipal code. Like I said, we had in our wastewater chapter code that allowed for us to have a special discharge permits under the Public Works Director's authority. So that allowed us to start working with roads to get them into compliance before our program was approved. But within that, it's find a line of when it's more valuable to put effort into developing your required pretreatment program. Always hindsight is 2020, but I really should have done this 6 months ago, because we're at this point now that, yes, they have made a lot of progress, but they're still in significant non-compliance. They are. And so, we have to do all this extra work to ensure that what we're doing can stand up in court and to deal with it, and it just takes up a lot of bandwidth, where if we had an actual pretreatment, like finalized pretreatment program, we had more teeth. We would be able to, cite the code, cite the required things they need to do, and also deal with significant non-compliance in that aspect. So, it's good to use what you have, but also know when that's going to be too much, because we're kind of at that point now, and that's why I'm kind of in this big final push of, finishing up our program approval. And kind of another tool that I found really helpful, especially when I first started, was starting to work with an industry, is set out an internal action plan. And this is just something between you and your supervisor and maybe even some of the higher ups of, how are we going to go about this? Are we going to give them a notice of violation? Are we going to do some compliance orders? Are we going to give them some dates? How are we going to proceed with fines? Just so you know the direction that you're going. And as difficult as they have been to work with, we have had a pretty good layout of what we wanted to do, and and kind of like the consent agreement, right? Like, we got to a point that fines weren't working. Let's actually put them in a legally binding document and get them set so that we're working with you, but you still have to do this. So, and it also helps because you have to do enforcement response plans, and you need to put together your program manual. So it just kind of two birds, one stone with that. And for me, is reaching out to other communities with successful pretreatment programs. You are not, and I am not, reinventing the wheel. And also AQUA, which is the Association of Clean Water Agencies, has been a very valuable resource for me, as far as I came into a position that's never existed for this city. So I was able to go in and do some job shadowing and kind of look at how their programs are organized and how they deal with all of it. And they sent me some documentation, and that's just been really valuable. And I learned so much more than just trying to, trial by fire type of a thing, is actually going and seeing how other cities administer their programs. And then also, like I said, for building the city code, is the EPA model ordinance is a really great tool to start with, just to kind of see this is what's required, the verbiage, and how you want to kind of go about, implementing that into your city code. And so that's pretty much, those are the main things. I don't think I would have gotten as far as building this program if I would have had to do it alone, and you don't have to. So definitely reach out. And then having open communication with your regulators, which for me is the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We have a really great pretreatment coordinator for the state, and we've been keeping her in the loop about where we're at with the permitting process, and they support us and they understand what's going on. And you just don't want to, same thing, catch them by surprise or get yourself caught by surprise, and kind of keeping everyone in the loop of what's going on. But yeah, those are kind of our main lessons and advice that I have so far. I'm sure I'll have more as this continues. But that's pretty much where we're at. If there are any other questions, and I have my contact info up here if you have other questions outside of the webinar. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. We do have a few questions in the question box.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with one that's kind of related to just what you touched on. Someone was asking if you could explain a little bit more why state DEQ or EPA couldn't step in when you guys were having compliance issues. Can you take us through that a bit?
Yeah. So that was kind of a call that was made by our public works director and our and kind of our city council and city manager. So we did talk about that, and that is something that was a tool, right? I always said, we can bring the state in and it becomes much more of a serious situation. And so I think the reason they didn't do that, because I didn't really make that call, but they, if the EPA and the state steps in, the city's also in violation, because we need to administer a pretreatment program. The city did not do this sooner. We should have. This should have been done about a decade ago, to be honest. So I think that it was kind of using that. And also we were trying to build a good, healthy working relationship with Rogue, which, yes, they have been really difficult, but at the end of the day, we need to be their regulators for the pretreatment. And so the idea was that if we work with them and kind of are the only people that they deal with without kind of bringing in the quote unquote heavy hitters, which is DEQ and EPA. So I think that it's more that we caught it and then we were going to administer it, then they wanted to build this relationship with them. So it's not just it's not all punitive, right? It's more assistive. And so that was kind of the approach that was made. And that was before I was even hired, that decision was made. So I think that's why they pushed to hire me so early, just, while developing the program, was because they wanted to kind of build a relationship. But that is actually, that is the next tool in the toolbox of, if they get to the point, I'm going to bring in DEQ, and then they get into significant non-compliance. And so that's kind of the decisions that were made for that.
Excellent. Thank you for detailing. Another question we had is whether you've had any issues with being allowed access for an inspection, and if so, what strategies did you use in this situation what was your approach to gain access?
Yeah, so they, for the most part, I will say, as difficult as they have been good about access. When we want to inspect, we go in, and I remember the first inspection, and it was a lot of why are you storing chemicals like that? You should not have acid and bases right next to each other. And a lot of kind of chemical storage issues that they had right away. And if we have had any issues, it is in our city code, they have to allow city inspectors on site. So, we did have the plan of, if I really got a lot of pushback, we have a community enforcement officer who would come out, and then at that point it would also come out with a police officer. So, but that didn't happen, which was really lucky. For all the difficult that they've had, it's more that they're just ignoring the pre-treatment requirements, but they were allowing us on site. It was nice.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Another question we have for you is, if you can, would you mind telling us a little bit about your wastewater treatment plant there at the city of Newport, the process?
Yeah, of course. So we have, we don't have any primary treatment, if that makes sense. We don't have the settling and then it goes into biological. They have, it's this series of 3 oxidation ditches. And I do apologize, I'm not a wastewater operator, so if this is not perfect, I'm trying. But yeah, so basically we have, it's a 3 series oxidation ditches that go in a circle, and they have the highest oxygen content goes to a lower as it goes through, and then it goes to get settled out a little bit more, and then it goes into, we have an aerobic digester. And then our solids, we have Class A biosolids here, so they actually take it and it goes through pasteurization process with lime addition. So they put it through a centrifuge and then pasteurization, lime addition, and then we have Class A biosolids to be distributed to some farm land application. But yeah, so that's kind of where that max oxygen issue is, that we have those oxygen wheels the wheels that input oxygen, and they are in the summertime, during normal years, they're 100%. So they're maxed out in order for us to meet our plant. We also do have kind of an interesting thing, is that we have a bay between our city. And so all of our wastewater, and the wastewater treatment plant is on the south end of the bay. So all of our wastewater is piped underneath the bay, treated, and then it's piped back underneath the bay to our discharge point, which goes about a mile out into the ocean. So we also have, for our contact for disinfection, so we add chlorine, and then we take the little bit of chlorine out, and then it's got like a really long time in a pressurized pipe to get out. So it's kind of a weird treatment system. But yeah, that's kind of where we have the oxidation ditches. We don't have like primary and secondary treatment, and we don't do tertiary treatment out here. I know some places do. So that's kind of, I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. Someone asked why you think that this particular industry ignored city regulations for so long, for so many years.
Yeah, I think the first is honestly a little bit on the city for the fact that no one did anything. Because this brewery started, I believe they started in 1996, and they were like the small microbrewery, and then they really grew. I mean, I think Rogue is one of the more widely distributed Oregon beers. And they just, I think between that and then the city never followed through. We would ask a few things, and then we would get, as far as I could tell historically, like have a letter, like what's your BOD? It's really high from the single grab, and it just there was no follow through. They didn't do their industrial user surveys, and then because of that, I think they got the idea, Rogue did, that they could do what they wanted. And so the idea that we were coming in later after they are a big business and they require a pretty large pretreatment system, they just didn't want to do that. And also they aren't really involved, because in Oregon there is like a big brewery association where the push is like sustainability and environmental compliance, and like they're trying to, as an industry, like have a good reputation, and they're not a part of that at all. And so that was one piece of advice that I'd give them. I was like, hey, go to these breweries that have really successful pretreatment systems and go tour it. Ask them questions. I mean, this isn't proprietary, it's wastewater treatment. But they just didn't do that. And I think it's this idea, I mean, their business model is literally being the different one, the Rogue. And I think it just kind of, between not having any kind of enforcement or attention paid to them by the city for, almost 20 years, pretty much 20 years, and then not being involved in the brewery community as a whole, I just don't think it just kind of was like a perfect storm of, they just didn't think they needed to do anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that might be common across programs nationwide.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely small communities. I know a lot of people have been, I know even in the Oregon coast, there's another community that's kind of struggling with it too. So I'm hoping that we can be like a case study of like, this is how not to do things sometimes in the long run.
Well, we have two more questions. I think one is a shorter answer, so I'll ask that one first and end with the second. Oh, a third came in. So someone's wondering if you guys have a dive team that checks your outfall.
I think we do, but yeah. So I know actually, I don't know that 100%, but I think we do. I think we just hire like a consultant that comes out, because we are we're out in the ocean, and we are also, our outfall is right next to another outfall from a paper plant. So sometimes that makes it confusing of who's causing what. But yeah, I do believe they have a dive team, because they do have to check the kind of health of our system. So I don't think it's our personal dive team. I think we have a consultant, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Someone else is asking if you can talk a little bit more, maybe briefly, about any community involvement with this particular case study. I know you touched on it a bit, but.
Yeah, so we do have, like I said, we have a pretty big environmental push in our community, which I think is awesome. And so there is a group, I believe it's called the Surfriders Association, and they do a lot of water quality concerns anyways. So they're the ones that really watch us for spills, storm water quality, and kind of all of that. So they're working with another lady who's kind of just, she just found a big interest in Rogue. So they come to, because we have 2 city council meetings a month, and they put in comments and ask questions probably once or twice a month. So they are involved. And so that's one thing, as I mentioned, is we try to be really transparent of our decision-making process with them, of why we're doing what we're doing and kind of the justification. But mostly it's just they do a lot of information requests, and they kind of constantly check in on where we're at. So that's kind of, it's good in the sense that it spurs that upper management side of this. They're very motivated to get this going, which is great for me. I have the approval. So.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. We
Mhm.
did have one final question, but I think we've pretty much run to the end of the time slot. But I think it would be a really great question, perhaps, for Al on Thursday if the person who put the question up is planning to attend. But it was if they wanted to see if you could go into your approach in permitting or working with a facility and figuring out if they are a categorical user or a significant industrial user. And I do
Mhm.
think we have a presentation that's going to speak more specifically on that, on
Yeah. I
categorizing.
mean, yeah. So I think, the short answer is that per like the regulatory requirements is that I believe is it 25%? Not right in front of me, but that you have to prove that it's 25% of your loading or your flow, which they definitely are for us. And then beyond that, if they cause any inhibition or pass through. So also had that. They killed our biological treatment a few times over the years with low pH. And then categorical, that's kind of what my next process is once we get our program going, is kind of going through and testing. And that's kind of the same thing as we just going to go and test and see kind of what they're doing and how often they're putting, see some other breweries, waste into our system, what that consists of. And then as well as with pollutants of concern. And that's where the sampling for local limits comes into play, is outside of organic loading and pH, you may have some heavy metals or whatever pollutants that are an issue in what industry they're coming from. So yeah, I'm sure Al can go into much more detail, but that's my short, quick answer.
Yeah, and also we have Nikki Schaefer with Baxter and Woodman. She's going to go, her presentation is specifically on, categorical determination. So that's going to be
Perfect.
on Thursday. Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. That was a really neat presentation. Folks, I'm glad you're still hanging in there with us. I'm going to go ahead and do our second round of polling. So you should see this on your screen. So if you'll go ahead and participate in the poll, we'll give it let's see. Yep, it's going, and we'll give it a minute, go through both questions. All right. Thanks for your time, Stephanie. Take care.
Yes, thank you.
We do have a question about the polls. It says that some folks might be having a problem answering. Let's see, it says it is asking for 2 questions. Let's go ahead and there might be something wrong with this poll. So if you'll just click one of the answers so that it records that you are participating in the, I think it was worded incorrectly. But so the purpose of the poll is for us to record your participation. So we had to confirm with our CEU accreditation entity that we were going to kind of do a Netflix, are you still watching approach. So if you'll just answer the poll or one of them, and I'm going to go ahead and close it out and do the second one. So perhaps the second one worded a little better. Like I said, so that's the purpose of the polls, just to make sure you're still there, and we will get a report that is based off of your personal login identification, how you logged in today, and it'll show us every time you did a poll, and we will give you 0.1 CEUs for each hour. So that's how we're going to track and log the CEU accrual for each of you. That is the main purpose. If there was time, we would have some discussion around the polls, but mostly we're using it to confirm participation. So, okay. I see a little bit of activity still on the poll, so I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds, and then we are going to have Lisa Luck join us. All right, I'm going to just wait for the activity on the poll to come to a standstill so I can make sure everyone has the opportunity to engage and participate in the poll. Okay. And if you have any issues with taking the poll, please reach out to via the questions box, the chat feature, or you can even send me an email directly. We just want to have something time-stamping your participation. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and share results. And now, let's see. We're going to, I see there's a lot of activity in the questions box. So I'm going to introduce Lisa. Lisa, welcome. And then we will circle back to the questions box and answer your questions there. So Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and share your screen. Welcome today. Thank you so much for agreeing to present with us. Let's see.
Thanks. I'm going to see if I can get my screen shared here.
Am I saying your last name correctly, Lucht?
Lucked, yes, like I lucked out.
Great. Okay. I don't see your screen just yet, so let me try. It should be. Let me know if you have any issues. There we go. Looks like it's starting to switch over. All right. We see a beautiful.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the other
picture.
screen. I need the other screen here. We're going to fix it like that. Dual monitors makes it a little tricky sometimes. Here we go. Now we've got the right thing up there. Can you see my presentation now?
We can see it, and I will ask you as well because I know we asked, and I don't have the tracking sheet in front of me. So would you like questions real time, or you want us to hold them off till a Q&A session at the end?
It does not matter. We can do both. If there are questions throughout, we can certainly talk through those, and otherwise, if there's plenty at the end, we can do that. So.
Great, yeah, so I'll kind of make the determination if it seems like it would be a good bit of information for you to expand on, I'll ask, and then otherwise we'll hold them till the end.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, Lisa.
I'm not sure if you can see the control panel up in the top right-hand corner. I don't know how to make that go away if you can.
No, we don't see that. We can just see your screen.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, today we are going to go through conducting effective industrial user site inspections. We try to have a little bit of fun with our presentations when we're doing them for Baxter and Woodman, so you'll see what I mean in a few minutes. But I am Lisa Lucht. I work for Baxter and Woodman, which is a consulting engineering firm in the Chicagoland area. I've been an engineer for 17 years, and I've been doing industrial pretreatment for 9 years now. It's my primary focus. The best part about being a consultant is we really get to see a lot of different pretreatment clients and what they are dealing with whether they have small plants or a large service area going into a smaller plant. We have rural clients, we have urban clients, and we're really lucky we get to see a lot of different things. So there are multiple different kinds of site inspections that can be done to gather a lot of different information on industrial users. And we're going to go through primarily classification site inspections because I do a lot of those myself in conducting industrial user surveys for our clients. So classification site inspections can be to identify a new industrial user or to gather information for permitting and classification. Or you can do site inspections for your existing industrial users that you're already aware of, those annual site inspections of permitted IU or any industries of concern that might be in your service area. Maybe they are having an issue with non-compliance, or if there is any discharge of concern or upset, something going to the plant. We've done site inspections for clients to try and find sources of ink or sources of rags and wipes that are coming to the treatment plant or causing significant issues with the collection system. Part of what I'm going to go through today is all in the EPA guidance, the new update from January of 2017. I say new because the previous version was from 1994. So this is some great information to be able to go through. It's called the Industrial User Inspection and Sampling Manual for POTWs. You can download it. It's a nice binder full of paper that you can download and print off or just save to your computer or your files and be able to go through it and search for information in there. But it is a wealth of information on site inspections. I urge you to go and hunt that down. And as I understand, all of these presentations will be available after all of the presentations are done at the end of this training session. So you should be able to get these links directly from this. So what types of sites should be inspected? Really, that's the first thing, is trying to figure out who needs to go and do a site, who needs a site inspection. So we identify a lot of those during an industrial user survey. So this is the survey where you're really trying to gather information on your full service area and understand who is discharging waste to the treatment plant. Those that might need a site inspection would be any that are discharging processed waste to the treatment plant. Perhaps perhaps they've been very forthcoming and given you the information and you understand, oh, this is a categorical process that we're going to need to go and better understand. It might be a high water user, might be someone that's in a problem area. If you have seen instances of those inks or wipes that are in the collection system, you may be able to go and actually find out who is causing those problems for you. Any food manufacturing, especially large food manufacturers that are using a lot of water, can be very interesting site inspections, especially if you're having trouble with fats, oils, and grease in your collection system. Or perhaps you're looking for any specific discharge requirements. I know in Illinois, the current focus is on phosphorus, mercury with dental amalgam, any other metals or chlorides. Perhaps you're seeing a lot of copper or zinc coming through in the influent of the treatment plant, and you want to try and hunt that down. Those can be some that you can be looking for specifically when you're doing your industrial user survey and on your site inspections. But overall, POTWs need to know what is being discharged to their treatment plant. It can affect the treatment plant operations. It can, as the previous presenter went through, it can take down a whole plant. One industry can take the plant out of commission. So we need to know what people are discharging. Effluent guidelines is a really great place to gather information. After you have your survey completed, you can go through that survey and perhaps you can do research before you are even going out and doing those inspections. The survey can give you those hints. And going to the effluent guidelines, I love to type effluent guidelines with whatever I know about the business. Maybe it's copper forming, maybe it's food manufacturing, maybe they're making Teflon. You can find a lot of information from doing that. You can research the raw materials. If you have their SIC codes, this link that I have here is a great resource to go through and find possible classifications for some of those businesses. When I've gone through, not all industries even know what their SIC codes are, or in some cases they provide you with the wrong SIC codes. So you might have to determine them yourself. But if you know of an SIC code from that business, you might be able to determine a possible classification for them and do a little bit more research on what you might want to ask during the site inspection. Scheduling site inspections for classification really is the best way to do that is to start by talking to the authorized representative and determining who should attend from the business and who should attend from your staff. As a consultant, we tend to go on these site inspections with our clients so that they know what is going on. But occasionally our clients are unavailable. Perhaps something's going on at the treatment plant and they're not able to attend with us. So we sometimes do those solo, and that works well too. We like to establish a specific date and time so that the industry knows when you're coming, giving them a little background on what you're going to be looking for and why you need to come in there. As Al mentioned this morning, going through and talking about your couple-minute speech of why is this important? Why do we have to be here? And what we're trying to gather from this is a great way to really introduce yourself and explain what pretreatment is, because many industries don't know. For large industries, it can take hours or days to go through a full, maybe they have a multiple building plant that you're going to have to go through, or small industries, it can be 45 minutes. Recently, I've had some that are as short as 15 minutes. I like to send a confirmation email with that date and time of when I'm going to be arriving so that they have documentation of it, and also so that I can sometimes get a confirmation from them of, oh yes, we're going to do this. On the other hand, sometimes unannounced inspections are really what you need to do. If there is a specific issue happening at the plant, perhaps, like I mentioned, those issues of color that are coming through the treatment plant, if the whole treatment plant has turned bright blue, you might be able to determine and need to go do a site inspection right away to determine that compliance issue and understand what could be coming to the treatment plant. Recently, I've started making the most of all of my hours in the day and creating a time window for arrival. So I'll tell the industry I'm going to arrive between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. This allows me to really move from one site inspection to the next so that I don't have a lot of downtime in between. We all are time crunched every day, it seems. So being able to just go from one to the next is really beneficial. It does, however, require you to be very organized and ready to go. So I have all of my site inspection forms prepped. I order them and put a number on them of which one I'm going to do first. In the time window, I put that on there too. I also have the name and the phone number of the contact person that I'm going to be meeting with, so that if I need to call them and say, hey, can I call in 15 minutes early, or I'll be there in about an hour just to give them an update, they greatly appreciate that. But I've had a lot of industries be just fine with me giving them a time window for that arrival. All right, COVID-19 has changed basically everything about our world, and site inspections have certainly been affected by this. Illinois was in a shelter-in-place order through, I believe, the end of June. Goodness, time is flying now that it's November. But we had some businesses that really did not want us to come in and do site inspections in person. We had the opportunity to really kind of pick and choose who we were going to do then and who we might need to do later. So I've done probably 20 site inspections from March 2020 until right now, with a variety of different concerns from those industries. So what we've had to determine is how many site inspections are actually necessary. Do we need to go there in person, or can we gather a lot of information over the phone or a video conference? Can they send us photos to help us through this? And really, we need to consider the goal of the inspection itself. Or is it for a compliance issue? Is it for classification? For one of our clients recently, we were trying to fulfill the requirements of their industrial user survey, and we needed to do a site inspection to classify those industries. By classifying them, we knew, okay, we need to determine if they are a categorical industrial user, are they a significant industrial user, or are they someone that really just isn't of concern to the treatment plant right now. By determining what that goal is of the inspection, we were able to do some of the classifications fully over the phone. Overall, we need to be conscious of the restrictions in place for ourselves and for others to keep everyone safe. We certainly don't want to be detrimental to a business or make anyone feel uncomfortable. Some cases we have to make them feel uncomfortable and go anyway, as Al was going through this morning about we have to do inspections in some cases, and in other times maybe they can be avoided. So one of the companies that I was working with said really they were not allowing any non-employees into their facility at all. They were a manufacturing company with a small staff, and they had determined that they were really not doing that. However, I could see almost all of their process from the outside of their building. They had large doors that they could open up, and I was able to see basically everything. So I was technically outside. It was a loophole that the industry and I figured out of how I would be able to see their process, but they would still be able to keep that non-entry for non-employees in place. And we got a lot of photos from them to be able to help with that classification of that business. We also have done some, what I'm calling a phone meeting inspection. I'm not sure another way to really describe it, but going through very detailed information with the business to understand what their classification is. So I used the same site inspection form that I use when I'm going in person, and we went through it all. We had a conference call. It was about an hour and a half on the phone, which is not fun, but it really fulfilled what we needed to. We went through all of their industrial user process. They gave me process diagrams in advance. And then I was really able to better understand what they were talking about after I used some other resources. So what the industry was doing was manufacturing ethanol. So by going through, this was not from the business themselves, but Google, use your whatever search engine you feel is best to go through. Sometimes you can find a diagram like this that will help you to better understand exactly what they've told you in words or what their process flow diagram looks like. And this really broke down what it was doing. I was able to research the dry mill ethanol process before we had that phone call, and I knew exactly what I needed to ask and that they were a categorical industrial user. So we were able to classify them without even visiting them in person. So what do you need to bring? If you're going on the actual site inspection, you've determined that you are going to show up in person. I always have business cards. I always have my identification with me. For several of our clients, we have a photo ID that is from the municipality themselves, saying that we are a contract employee. You have your personal protective equipment. We've heard PPE more now, I think in the past 6 months than we have ever before. You have your steel-toed boots and your hard hat, eye and ear protection, and a mask. Nowadays, in Illinois at least, there are mask mandates. So pretty much everyone has a mask on when you are with others. A lot of food manufacturing companies want you to remove your jewelry. So I usually leave that at home on site inspection days. And I have my trusty site inspection form that I'm going to fill out. In the age of COVID, the other things that you might have to consider are, do you have to do temperature checks? Are there self-certification of symptoms? Are there any travel restrictions? I know Cook County in Illinois, which is where we are, doesn't want people to be visiting other businesses and things like that if you have been traveling for 2 weeks prior to a whole list of states. So we are trying to limit any transferring of COVID-19 to others. They might have travel restrictions in place at those businesses as well. Limiting the number of attendees with municipalities. As we are a consultant, the municipalities, of course, have been trying to limit exposure for their staff as well. And we've had less people come with on-site inspections than we have in the past. Physical distancing, that also goes along with limiting the number of attendees. If you're going to be sitting in a conference room, you can't bring 7 people with you to do a site inspection when really all you need is 1 or 2 key people from the municipality or the consulting firm. And then any mask requirements, obviously keep yourself safe and make sure that you are prepared to go into a site inspection. This is me after a site inspection at a food manufacturing facility. I felt like I was fully prepared. I had my mask on and safety goggles, and then with a full hairnet and everything, we really are decked out sometimes for these site inspections. So it's very interesting to see everything that you can put on and jewelry off and be prepared. So. All right, our opening conference or meeting at a site inspection is really where you get a ton of information at the beginning. I always like to sit down and talk to the industry first and then tour the manufacturing facility. This is where you can explain really why you're there and the nuts and bolts of 40 CFR and the pretreatment program and what we need to be able to do on those site inspections. So sometimes we'll get enforcement waivers or documents forbidding evidence collection. I'm going to go through non-disclosure agreements and proprietary information a little bit later, but really those are things that we try not to even enter the idea of signing them. Sometimes they will want you to sign something, but basically we can say no, based on 40 CFR, we do not need to sign enforcement waivers or documents forbidding that collection of information. That is the whole purpose of us being there, and we have US EPA's documentation on that also. So the other thing that I've been trying to do is that initial conference is really very important. I've been trying to gather as much information as I can, even over the phone before I go. Can we walk through the basic details of things over the phone with the industry to gather just the basics of information, how many employees they have and things like that can easily be done over the phone so that you can focus your time more on the manufacturing areas itself. It is very difficult. I've realized in recent site inspections that with the mask on and hearing protection in, it is very difficult to hear others. And I did not realize how much I depended on lip reading in the manufacturing areas to gather information. So we really have to make better use of that initial conference or phone calls beforehand to get as much information as we can so that the manufacturing area, if it's loud, is more of a show and show. It's not a show and tell because you can't really hear much. We also like to get emailed documentation to us. So if there are safety data sheets or spill plan training that they're going to provide documentation of, or hauling records, those things are great to have them emailed to you rather than having to get hard copies of things. Limiting that time on a site inspection is really valuable to everyone. When we have been able to keep them short and sweet, it is a benefit to not only the industrial user, but yourself, as all of our time is limited. So these are the 5 essential questions that I say are the most important things to gather during the site inspection itself. You want to understand exactly what is being produced. What are they making at this facility? What are they manufacturing? What are their raw materials? What are they using? If they are making a rocking chair and they're using wood and glue, that's going to be much different than if they are doing metal finishing and they have a variety of different metals and chemicals that they are using. We want to understand their full process and how they create that product from raw material to the finished product. Anything that is hauled and any waste that is discharged, any water that is discharged, you want to understand exactly where it is coming from and where it is going. So what we try to get in that initial phone call or the sit down meeting is any contact information, the date for the start of production. This is really important when you're looking at new source dates for classification. Number of employees and hours of operation and shifts. If they are operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's going to be much different than a small manufacturing facility that has 3 employees operating 8 hours a day. You want to understand any waste that is being hauled from the facility, solid waste, but more specifically, any liquid waste that is being hauled. Digging a little deeper, you want to understand their discharge location. Can you physically find the sampling manhole location outside, or would the only place to sample them be at the end of process? It's yet to be determined. At some locations, they don't necessarily even know where the sampling manhole is, but if you have sanitary sewer maps, sometimes you can find those pretty easily. Any spill plans that they may have in place? Do they have safety data sheets? And is there spill containment around any large barrels or tanks of things? And then any facility cleanup. Some facilities are cleaning after each process. Some do an overnight cleanup, or some have a Saturday where they are cleaning the entire facility in one day. They'll wash down a giant food manufacturing area. You want to know exactly when they are going to be doing cleanup because that can affect their sampling and what could be coming from that facility. So digging a little deeper for information, these are some of the questions that I tend to ask when I'm out there. How do you do that? What is that process called? Overall, they are the experts. So I like to try and have them explain, like, how did you get into this? How did you develop your business? When did you start doing that process? Where does that process happen? Can you show me? That's my favorite question. Can you show me? Because sometimes they will have an actual employee of their staff make something for you right there so you can fully see exactly what they're doing. Or if I'm trying to understand their process from beginning to end, I'll draw it out for them. Did I get this right? Do I have this in the right order? Am I missing anything? Are they doing all of those procedures on site, or are some of them being sent off site? So there's so many questions that we can ask, but letting them really show their expertise and being curious is just a great way to get information. I tell every business that I go to that my favorite part of my job is getting to go do site inspections, because I get to see how things are made, and people really like to share their facility. Unless, of course, you have some that are just not happy to have anyone from the government there at all. Going through that facility walkthrough, you need to make sure that you're being safe. Follow any protocols that the industry has given you. You're going to want to visit all areas throughout, from receiving of raw materials through shipping, to really understand exactly how it's being done. I like to take notes as I'm walking through, but I have learned that trying to walk, talk, and write all at the same time is really not safe, especially when there's forklifts flying through certain manufacturing facilities. We need to be careful. So I will stop and write. Even if I'm going way slower than the business representative is, and they are walking very fast, I will walk slow and go through the facility and take my time so that I can really ask for clarification and understand how things are being done. It's okay to go slow. It's okay to take a little bit of time to really understand it and make sure that you're keeping yourself safe. And then you really want to look through any areas where water is used. If there are pipes in certain areas, sometimes you can trace those back to the actual manufacturing that is being done and understand where those bits of discharge are. I look for any floor drains and things like that. Overall, document, document, document. Write it down. Make lists of things that you might want to ask when you're back in a closing conference, and really do as best as you can to document what is happening in that facility. It can save you time later from having to make an additional phone call or email to get more information. In simplified, some site inspections really just don't need to be that lengthy. If you are going there and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a really big deal, this is a big site inspection, and then you determine, oh, they're not doing what I thought that they were doing. It's okay to keep it short and sweet. Get a little bit of information from them. Went to a business recently that had been open since 1946, and they were doing some processes that would be a categorical process. However, the discharge didn't go to the drain. It went to a little bin underneath that was filled with kitty litter, and it goes into that, and they don't discharge anything from that. And I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be at all. So we kept it short and sweet. I was in and out of there within 20 minutes and got all the information that I needed. I understand that there's zero discharge and they're a good one to keep note of, but nothing that we need to really be concerned with. Site maps are a really great way to fully understand where everything is in a facility and how different things work. So we tend to grab fire escape maps if we can possibly get them, or sometimes businesses have a full setup of everything written out for you that you can get in advance or even during the site inspection. Being able to take notes on a printed out site map during your site inspection is a wonderful way for you to really understand it. And I typically point to things on the map and say, are we right here right now? Because I will get turned around in a large manufacturing facility very quickly. Process diagrams. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, this is an even better place to ask the question. I thought the last slide was, but I'll just throw this out there. We did have a question, and so perhaps you can go into a little more detail with this slide. They're wondering if you can explain a bit more the difference between an outfall and effluent.
Well, the outfall of a facility, really the effluent that could be coming from a manufacturing facility could be going to the sanitary sewer, or it could be hauled waste. So I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding. In this case, the one that I'm showing here, this is more where water is coming in, and this is a pretty complicated process diagram that is showing different things. So the outfall that is on here is potentially going to a river, or it could be going to the actual POTW. So their administration building is going to the POTW, but in this case, they have multiple different things that are happening at this facility, where one is going to, there's stuff going to the storm sewer, there's stuff going to the sanitary sewer, or perhaps it's going to a river or a stream as well. Things can be very complicated. I'm not sure if that was the correct answer to that question.
I think so. You said that, generally effluent is the processed waste that's leaving the facility, and the outfall is the actual structure that the effluent comes through when it enters the POTW.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So process diagrams like this, or the one that I got from the effluent, from the ethanol facility that I mentioned earlier, really can give a lot of detailed information and help you understand what the business is doing. These are pretty hard to get though. Not every business has this type of documentation available to you, and you sometimes have to draw them yourself. So I usually get confirmation of what I've drawn. I'll draw these little boxes and I'll draw different things and different, arrows coming from one place to another. This one is pretty complicated. Some of them are much simpler than that. The guidance document that I talked about before from EPA really goes through and provides a lot of great questions that you can ask of industries when you are there. I urge you to go through and find some of that information. If you know that you're going to a certain type of business, you can just see what types of questions it recommends you ask. For an auto body repair and a paint shop, you might want to know what kind of paint booths have a water curtain, or what they do with any unwanted paint. We want to make sure that they're not just dumping that down the drain. Auto washes, a lot of cleaners, potential phosphorus use. Like I mentioned, in Illinois, we're hunting down phosphorus right now. So sometimes looking for those minute sources can really be a great way to find, okay, this is a little bit coming from this car wash, but really nothing of concern. Do they have settling tanks, or are they cleaning the interior of tank trucks? That is a much different issue than just cleaning the outside. If they say, oh yeah, we're just a truck wash. Well, are you cleaning the inside of tanks? If so, they might be transportation equipment cleaning. Or a dairy and bakery or any food processing, we want to know what kind of equipment cleaning they're doing. Are there any byproducts? Do they have a grease trap, and how often is that going to be maintained? What exactly are they doing at the facility? Are they making the actual containers that the food is going to be in? Or are they just filling those containers with the food that they're making? Do they have any brines? What is being done with their solids? Are those being hauled? Perhaps it's going to be hauled off site to go be used as waste for, feed for, other animals or things like that. We've seen that in a lot of cases in the Midwest. Metal finishing. Metal finishing is always a fun thing to try and find. There are a lot of core processes: electroplating, electroless plating, anodizing, coating, chemical etching, and printed circuit board manufacturing. Those are the key things that you're looking for a categorical metal finisher. You want to understand exactly how often they're cleaning their solutions, that those are being changed out, and if they are discharged. There's a lot of different little things that you can get into with metal finishing, but once you get down, whether it's one of those top 6, that's how you're going to determine if they're going to be a categorical industrial user. Laboratories are very interesting to go and walk through, and understanding the different types of waste that they are generating. How are they treating their glassware? Is that being washed? Are they using acids for that? Are they doing any kind of neutralization before they are discharging? Perhaps they have pH neutralizers that they are going through. And how are they treating any pH probes? How often are those being calibrated? One other business that I saw over the summer, I thought, oh gosh, what are they doing at this facility? They're using so much water. They were using thousands and thousands of gallons a day. And I thought, oh, they're probably going to be a significant industrial user, because the name of the business sounded like they were a food manufacturer. Nope, they were a giant greenhouse. They were using a ton of water to water hydroponic tomatoes, which actually I have bought in the store before. So it was fun to see the actual facility where some of the things that are made or grown, where you actually buy those products yourself. So high water user might not necessarily automatically be a significant industrial user, because they're not discharging anything. The plants are taking all of that water instead. So now we're going to get into some of the questions that we go through or the things that we hear on site inspections. So I will often point to a different machine and say, what exactly does this machine do? So over the summer, I identified an industrial user that we thought we were just going to be confirming their classification as a metal finisher. Come to find out, they were doing metal molding and casting, which is a categorical process. But the municipality themselves hadn't realized that this was a categorical process, because really the machine itself looked very benign. It just looked like a small machine, and it didn't look like anything that could be doing a categorical process with it. It also uses just a very small amount of water. So metal molding and casting of gold and silver is not regulated, but they were also doing it with brass. And the component of brass, the copper component of that brass was higher than zinc. So they were actually doing metal molding and casting of copper and were a categorical industrial user because of that. So sometimes it's just about asking the right question and having them further explain exactly what they're doing with that. So what is shown here in the picture on the right is the tree, essentially, that has all the rings on it of what they'd use to do that investment casting. Very interesting process that I learned a lot more about this summer. We will often hear, oh, it's only just a little bit of water. We're only sending a little bit of water. A lot of businesses will think that just because it is a small amount of water that is going to the treatment plant, that it is not of concern to the overall treatment plant itself. We had an issue where one business was not using any water for their copper forming process. That was completely dry. But what we didn't realize was that their alkaline cleaning water was off the charts with metals. Copper and zinc were greater than 100 milligrams per liter, but they were only discharging 1 to 200 gallons per day. Once we got them to switch over and do a zero discharge of that alkaline cleaning water, which is a regulated process under 40 CFR 468 under copper forming, once they started hauling that waste instead, the sludge improved significantly at the POTW. Sometimes it's just that small source that you're not realizing. It's a small amount of flow that is coming from that facility can be really high in metals. I also heard this recently. It's a closed loop system. Nothing is going to the drain. So I visited an iron and steel manufacturing facility. They were doing acid pickling, and it's a completely closed loop system. Oh, nothing goes to the drain. When I actually got to their facility though, I said, okay, well, show me exactly what you're doing. I thought they were zero discharge until they showed me the fume scrubber. Oh, well, where does the fume scrubber discharge go? Oh, that goes to the sanitary sewer, but nothing else does. So it's really nothing of concern. That fume scrubber waste is regulated under 40 CFR 420 iron and steel manufacturing. So you really want to understand and then research every little bit that could be going to the treatment plant, because even that, the fume scrubber discharge was regulated. We hear all of our chemicals are environmentally friendly. It's not always what the chemicals are doing, but it's what the chemicals are washing off. For that alkaline cleaning, oh, we pH neutralize everything, but it's about what is being cleaned and what could be going to the treatment plant from that chemical that is washing it off. So sometimes we're looking deeper into that and trying to better understand it. I had one business that just said, oh, we just squeegee that cleaning water right out the back door. And I kind of choked for a second. I'm okay. Oh, well, that's unique. Can you tell me a little bit more about that procedure? How do you do that exactly? So they were squeegeeing it out the back door to the storm sewer instead. It was cleaning waters from the inside of something. It's probably not something that was super harmful, but they did not have a permit for that use at all. And it should have been piped inside to go to the sanitary sewer so that waste could be properly treated instead of going to the storm sewer. So sometimes we'll get an interesting response when you are going through something and, oh, tell me about that. If you don't act surprised and tell them immediately, oh no, that's horrible, you can't do that, you can get all the information you need if you just have them explain it. We can sort of plead the fifth as we're going through sometimes and have them explain to us what they're doing without fully allowing them to fully understand that no, that's not going to be an appropriate procedure going forward. I know Al was talking this morning also about being able to take pictures. Sometimes we just ask flat out if we can take photos, and it can be very helpful to help jar your memory when you're going to write up all of the notes. You can document their process. I like to take photos of chemical labels. If they say that, oh, we'll get you safety data sheets in a couple days, I can just take a picture of it, and sometimes I can find what I need based on what is on the actual chemical label itself. A location of a sampling manhole, if you're going to want staff to come back and take a sample in the future, then you'll be able to point them right in the direction of where you want them to go. And as Al mentioned this morning, you can include that in your ordinance itself to say that you would be able to take photos and be able to have that documentation, because really it can help to better understand exactly what they are doing at that facility. We all want to understand what their solid and hazardous waste is, what is being generated, and where it is going. Exactly how is that waste going to be disposed of? Is anything recycled within the facility itself before it is discharged or hauled? And then how often is it being hauled? Can they provide their hauling records so that you can see those and understand what is being taken away? And do they have any sludge, perhaps from a pretreatment system, that is being hauled off, and understanding exactly where that is going? Speaking of the pretreatment system, do they have one? What exactly is in place that is helping them to treat their waste before it is being discharged? Or perhaps their pretreatment system makes it so that they have no discharge. Perhaps an evaporator. I visited a facility recently that evaporated all of their waste, and then their sludge was hauled off because they did not want to have any discharge from their facility. How is that pretreatment system used, and what are their chemicals? Perhaps they're doing pH neutralization and you want to know exactly what they're doing to neutralize their waste. Is their pH probe being calibrated? Are they testing? Are they keeping records of that testing beforehand? Perhaps they have a full lab that they are doing diagnostic testing before they're even discharging any of that waste. And then, is it a batch or a continuous discharge from that pretreatment system? What is the size of the batch? What is the frequency of it? Sometimes the waste would be just fine if they were discharging, as long as they aren't discharging a very sizable batch of it. If they're discharging 5,000 gallons of something to the treatment plant, it could be a slug load. If they broke that up and did that less frequently, or more frequently, I mean, and had that discharge be continuous instead, it might not be of any issue to the treatment plant itself. We like to look into chemical storage as well, and where things are stored in their facility. Do they have large tanks that we need to be concerned about? Are there floor drains? And I always want to know if they're capped or open. We want to know if there is spill containment, and is that spill containment adequate and properly sized for what is there, especially for any tanks that could be outside, right next to a floor drain itself. Are their tanks double walled? If it's going to get hit by a forklift, is that going to cause a huge issue? And do they have cleanup kits and a spill plan so that their staff knows exactly what they should do? We'd like to have them keep spill plan training records, and then we get a copy of that so that we know that they are doing that training annually. Then your closing conference. I think this is very important now as we are in COVID to ask for clarification, get any missing information, discuss with them next steps. Some businesses want to know exactly what you're going to do with this information. So you can say, oh, we'll follow up with you with a letter. I like to go back and summarize my notes right away as soon as I can and write up a report, write up a full summary of what we found at that facility. But I really don't like to tell them what their classification is or what the next steps are until I have the opportunity to go back. Once in a while, we will go out, we will do a facility inspection, and I'll think, oh, I need to go and research this and read up on the regulations before I am able to make any type of determination for them. So I'll kind of keep them in suspense a little bit and say, oh, we'll get back to you. I'll follow up with an email and some further questions for you after I have the chance to review the regulations. Ethics. It's always very important to be ethical when we are out there working with all of these businesses. We want to make sure that we have a good, solid working relationship with them. I say firm but responsive. We are going to work with them because we are the regulatory authority and we need to get the information that we need. However, we need to just get our information and get out of there. We're not going for a full lengthy discussion with them on all of their business practices. We need to understand what they're doing and move on. No negative comments on anything that they're doing. If they're making a product that you don't believe in, that is not the time to offer that commentary to them. And we accept no gifts, no favors, no lunches, no benefits, nothing while we are doing that walkthrough of the facility. So what if they deny you entry? Your legal authority to site inspect should be in your sewer use ordinance to make sure that you have the legal authority to go in and do that. If your ordinance does not have that legal authority in there indicating that you can go in for a site inspection and gather that information, it is time to rewrite your ordinance to have all of that information in there. You're going to document, if they are denying you entry, you're going to document exactly the date and the time, the reason for refusal, and the name and the title of person refusing entry. Sometimes it is a staff member that does not feel like they can let someone in because they're concerned, oh, I'm going to lose my job if I let you in. Sometimes we need to talk to the authorized representative and explain to them what kind of information we're looking for. We're not going to discuss potential penalties. It can be considered coercion. If you're saying, oh, if you don't let me in, we're going to come back here with a warrant and we're going to get in anyway. Nope, we're just going to document what is happening and the fact that they are not allowing us entry into the facility. And then you're going to contact your POTW legal counsel and be able to provide them the documentation in the ordinance. You can get warrants for this. I've not yet had to get a warrant to go in and do a site inspection, but I know that does happen. You also need to make sure that your intergovernmental agreements are pointing to the ordinance saying that since you are treating that waste of another municipality's business, that you still need to have the ability to do a site inspection, and those need to be worded appropriately to allow you to go in there. What about if they want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement? I had one over the summer that said, you may not share this information without explicit permission. The whole purpose of us doing our site inspection was to meet the requirements of the industrial waste survey, and we were going to have to submit information about that facility and what they were doing to EPA as part of that discharge permit requirement. So we did not sign the non-disclosure agreement. We ended up getting a lot of information from them that they had removed proprietary information so that we could get in there and do a site inspection, and they showed us just what we needed. I don't need to know the nitty-gritty details of exactly what they were doing as long as I understand the basics and that they were a categorical industrial user. In general, we're not going to sign non-disclosure agreements, and you can request legal counsel by talking to the POTW's attorney. What about if it's proprietary information? US EPA actually has a full section about handling proprietary and confidential information. So you can read more in detail on this about how exactly, if it is proprietary and you need that information from them because it is causing an issue with the treatment plant or because you need it for classification purposes, there's certain ways that proprietary and confidential information has to be handled. Overall, in most cases, we just need to understand the basics. I don't need to know or take photos or document anything that is truly proprietary, that is under, if you're getting the ability to manufacture this, we just need to understand the basics of what they're doing and what is going to the sanitary sewer. Sampling, really we can get a lot of information from what is coming from the actual manufacturing facility. You can provide great information. You want to take your 24-hour composite samples and you want it to be representative of their actual discharge. We have one food manufacturer in the Chicagoland area that is discharging, but really their waste is domestic with the exception of an hour-and-a-half portion after they're done with their food manufacturing. If we catch them within that hour-and-a-half window where they are doing their cleaning cycles, that is the representative waste that we want. So we typically have to go out and have a sampler there during that time window to grab samples of their fog and pH during that time. Sometimes that means you have to coordinate with them. Or perhaps you need to have extended sampling where you're doing sampling over 3 or 4 days to really gather samples of what it looks like for a full week, and just leave the sampler out there, go out, grab your samples and leave it there for longer than you would think you would have to really understand exactly what they're doing. Of course, you always want to use 40 CFR Part 136 procedures so that you know that that waste, you know that the waste is being analyzed appropriately. And I think that's about it, other than any questions you may have today.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a really great presentation. We did have a question for you. Let's see. Someone was asking about the dynamic around the relationship between your consulting firm and the POTW. So are the inspections completed through a contract with the POTW, and how is enforcement and compliance and enforcement managed?
It can get a little complicated. Yes, we have contracts where we are working with our clients, the municipalities, to, in some cases, run their full pretreatment program. All the day-to-day pretreatment program goes through us. So it's in their ordinance that they have a consultant that is doing that. In many cases, they will join us for site inspections. All of the notices of violation are with them on it. So we are doing things with their say-so every step of the way. So when we're doing an industrial user survey, I will call those industries and say, I am calling from the village of blank on behalf of the village of blank, and I will say that I am from Baxter and Woodman. So all of the industries that we are working with as we are doing site inspections know that we are consultants. Sometimes that causes issues. So our clients, the POTWs, are really copied on a lot of information, and sometimes they have to weigh in and say, no, this is our consultant. We have hired them and they have the authority to come in and do this site inspection. They have the authority to do this industrial user survey, or that all of the documentation that is coming from them is on behalf of the municipality.
Gotcha. A few folks asked if you would be willing to share an example of one of the inspection forms that you use.
Yes, we can do that. Yeah, really it's based on an EPA example of what we have found, and we've just added to that over the years. But yes, we'd be happy to share that.
Okay, yeah, then I'll get that from you. And when we post the presentations to our website, we will add that document. We'll upload that document as well.
Okay.
Well, I don't see any other questions, but we'll have her information. And if you guys, before we get the presentations posted, if you have any specific questions for Lisa or any of the presenters, feel free to contact me and I'll get you in touch. All right, well, thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today. It was really a treat to hear your presentation.
Thanks so much. Yeah, nice being here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa. This is Carissa again, and we're going to open up our next poll. The folks should be able to see that right now. All right, we're going to close that. share your results. And one more poll for everybody for this presentation. And here are the results.
Great. Thanks, guys, for participating in these polls. I'm going to give, we're asked to maybe give a minute or two for folks to stretch their legs or pop out to the bathroom. Since it's not yet the top of the hour, we'll give a minute or two for you guys to take a break before introducing the next speaker. So we'll just take a moment and circle back at about 11:01 Pacific Standard Time. I wish I had some good elevator music to share. Yeah, we had a really great question while we're waiting before we jump into the next presentation. Someone asked if we could share the number of people attending and where they're from. While I don't have specifics, we have about 250 specifics on location. We have about 250 people on here right now. So hello to you all. If you'd like, it might be interesting to put into the question box where you're attending from. We've got Idaho, Kennewick, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Utah, North Dakota, Sioux City, Idaho, Yakima, Washington, Chicagoland, Springs, Colorado, Chesapeake, Virginia, Newburgh, Oregon, Victoria, BC, Sacramento, San Jose, California. We've got someone from Georgia on here, some folks from Colorado, Spokane, some more from California, Arizona, Oregon, South Carolina, Tucson, Arizona, Salem, Oregon, Pearland, Texas. Hey, I was born in Alvin, Texas. The Dalles, Wisconsin, Hawaii, Tacoma, Washington, Walla Walla, Washington, some more from Honolulu, Illinois, North Dakota, Alberta, Canada, Missouri, South Florida. Oh, wow. Well, that was fun. How neat. Welcome all. We look forward to this entire webinar series. I'll go ahead and introduce our next speaker. We have Lindsay Cowles. She's the Industrial Pretreatment Program Coordinator for Salt Lake City. So Lindsay, I'm going to go ahead and change you to the presenter. Oh goodness, you were there for a moment. Oh, we've already got you hooked up. So if you'll just agree to share your screen, there you go. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Lindsay. I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much for inviting me today. Greetings from Salt Lake City, Utah. It is a beautiful day. It's 65 and sunny, and the kind of day you don't want to spend the day in the office. So kind of hard with COVID and being more constricted and confined to home. Anyway, I'm very excited to be able to share this presentation with you. Before we get started, I just want to give you a brief overview of the Salt Lake City Water Reclamation Facility. So we serve a population of about 2,000 people, and our design for our treatment plant is 56 MGD, and we average about 32 to 36 MGD on a daily basis. And of that flow, about 3.1 MGD is industrial flow, and another 4.5 comes from commercial flow. As far as the treatment processes go at the plant, we have clarifiers, trickling filters, aeration basins, secondary clarification, chlorine disinfection, and then we have recently begun mechanical dewatering. Salt Lake City is currently in the middle of building a brand new treatment facility, and this is in order to be able to obtain limits set by the Utah Department of Water Quality for the city of Salt Lake. These nutrient limits will include phosphorus and a nitrogen limit. And so in order to meet those new limits, we are reconstructing our facility. It is about 55 years old, and we will have the new facility up and running by January 1st, 2025. So as part of the new facility, we will do dewatering, and then we will also add some biological nutrient removal treatment options to make sure those limits are met. As far as the pretreatment program in Salt Lake City, we have about 100 permitted facilities that are both SIU and CIU users. Some of the categories that we deal with are 414 electroplating, 415 organic chemicals, plastics, and synthetic fibers, 417 soap and detergent manufacturing, petroleum refining, 423 steam electric power generating, 428 rubber manufacturing, 433 metal finishing, centralized waste treatment, pharmaceutical, transportation, ink formulating, metal molding and casting, electrical and electronic components are just a few of the many categories that we deal with on a daily basis. And one reason I love this program so much is the variety it provides. It's never a dull moment. There's always something going on, and it's fun to see the different categories. So before we do inspections, we always want to consider our safety, and we want to take into account physical hazards, chemical hazards, atmospheric hazards, and what sort of PPE we will need to conduct a safe inspection. So when we first go to a facility, it's pretty easy to see what their general housekeeping status is. You know, make sure there's no hoses laying around or cords or chemicals out in the open. Do your facilities store their chemicals in proper containment and separated? What are atmospheric hazards that you may encounter at a permitted facility? One of my favorite examples was we were conducting an on-site inspection at a permitted facility and walked by a building and turned to the company representative and said, "Oh man, that does not smell good." And his response was, "Hey, don't even worry about it. You get accustomed to the smell." But really, do you? No, you actually become desensitized, and it is still a safety hazard. So you may want to consider wearing atmospheric monitoring depending on the facility you are investigating or inspecting. Also, don't ever put your safety at risk. It's just not worth it. And then consider what sort of PPE you need to wear in order to safely inspect the facility. You have your basics, steel-toed or safety boots, safety glasses, gloves, a safety vest, a hard hat. In some of our facilities, we are also required to wear fire retardant coveralls. So each facility can have unique requirements to be permitted on site. And remember that you are the guest on the facility and you should follow their safety protocol. So we are sewer spies. That is our job. We are there to make sure that companies and businesses aren't doing anything illegal or anything that will harm the sewer system, the collection system, or the POTW, or endanger the health and safety of any workers or the public. So conducting inspections can be quite intimidating, especially as you're first starting in pretreatment. I know it was very intimidating for me. So today I'd just like to share a couple of industries that we have in Salt Lake and offer a unique perspective into what we have seen and what you can do for your industry inspections. The first industry that I'd like to walk through is the Salt Lake International Airport. This is a very large facility and it has over 7,000 acres, 4 runways. In 2019, almost 27 million passengers flew through the airport. Of course, that is now a lot lower due to COVID. And of that 27 million passengers, there was almost 345,000 takeoffs and landings, which equates to about 900 takeoffs and landings per day. And just on average, there are over 370 scheduled nonstop flights to 99 cities. It is the 23rd busiest airport in North America and 85th busiest airport in the world. And I know some of your cities have a lot larger airports, but this is pretty big for us. In fact, we just completed the expansion of the airport, including 2 new concourses. So what really is our concern in this instance is the wintertime operations at the airport. So the first one is snow removal. So they have 52.6 million square feet of airfields and roads that need to be cleared during a snowstorm. They have 60 pieces of equipment to help with this. They include plow trucks, runway brooms, snow blowers, dump trucks, tanker trucks, ramp plows, and then they have 400 lighted airfield signs and 3,000 taxiway lights that are inspected and cleaned by hand during each winter storm. That would be quite the undertaking. So the other wintertime operation that we are concerned about is de-icing. So when temperatures drop below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, frost and ice and snow can accumulate on aircraft wings and tails, and this must be removed before a plane can safely take off. And this is where de-icing comes into play. So the Salt Lake City Airport has built a de-icing fluid reclamation facility, and the goal of this facility is to convert the runoff to 98% pure propylene glycol, which the airport can then recycle and sell to companies to use in other products such as paint and antifreeze. In 2016, the airport processed about 3 million gallons of fluid and recycled more than 10,000 gallons of glycol. So it is a large undertaking for them. This is just a quick chart of the amount of processed de-icing fluid throughout the years. You can see it varies based on the year and the wintertime season that we have. So what is propylene glycol? propylene glycol is the major component in de-icing fluid. If you just had propylene glycol, it has a very high BOD concentration, anywhere from 500,000 to 1,000,000 milligrams per liter. This can create a huge oxygen demand on your system, as well as have some impact on aquatic toxicity. Also, depending on the mix of de-icing fluid that is being used, phosphorus could also be a concern. The amount of fluid used to de-ice a single jet just depends on the nature of the precipitation event and the size of the aircraft, but it can range from several hundred gallons to several thousand gallons. Therefore, de-icing a single jet can generate a BOD loading greater than 1,000,000 gallons of raw sewage. So as you can see, this can have a huge impact on the collection system and the POTW. And to help recycle the de-icing fluid runoff even more, the Salt Lake City Airport bought some machines that go out and gather and collect fluid that has left the de-icing pads. And 49 to 80% of de-icing fluid runs off the jet that is being de-iced. So in addition to the large BOD loading that can impact your sewer system, there can also be other side effects of propylene glycol. It can break down and have bad effects in the collection system. In 2012-2013, the city started receiving multiple complaints of a really strong onion odor around the Salt Lake City Airport. After doing much research, it was revealed that the propylene glycol can break down in sewer systems, causing this onion odor. And through sampling, this was traced back to the de-icing facility. As a result of this investigation and the odor complaints, the Salt Lake City Airport applied to the Division of Water Quality to change their process into land apply, thus saving the sewer system and preventing further complaints of odor. And this change happened in 2014. Prior to being land applied, they were permitted to discharge based on the concentration of COD. So the lower the concentration, the more they were able to discharge to the sewer system. And the higher the concentration, the less they were able to discharge. As far as the pretreatment system that the facility had on site, it would follow the following order. It went through a plate clarifier and a water softening system, as well as ultrafiltration, ion exchange, reverse osmosis, through activated carbon, and final step was a mechanical vapor recovery unit. And then the wastewater that was separated from the propylene glycol was land applied, and that equates to about 2 to 5 million gallons that are land applied annually. So what sort of questions should you be asking at a facility like this? First of all, one of the biggest concerns is there a bypass? Is there a way that a slug load of propylene glycol could enter your sewer system? What are the possibilities of a spill or slug load reaching the sewer? The facility has multiple tanks and chemicals stored on site that could prove to be a potential problem for slug loads. What is the endpoint of the product? What happens with the propylene glycol that is recycled? Is it stored? Is it sold? Where does it end up? Is there hazardous waste generated in this system? How does the land application system work? And what type of PPE does staff use to protect themselves? These are not all the questions that can be asked, just a few questions to get you started on thinking about what you should be asking during inspections. Sometimes you just never know what you're gonna find when you go to visit different facilities. The next facility that I would like to talk about is a chemical manufacturer. We have a very large chemical manufacturer in Salt Lake City, and they can be very challenging to work with. So just really quick, quality is not an act, it is a habit. I love this quote because you can see which companies make quality a habit in how they present their facility to you. And it is very nice when you have permitted facilities who want to make sure that their quality is a habit and a safe place to go and inspect. So some quick facts about the chemical manufacturer in Salt Lake City. They have over 37 acres of process area. They make over 1,000 different chemicals. As far as permitting, we permit 4 different monitoring points at various parts of their facility. In total, they discharge about 90,000 gallons per day. They fall under many different categorical categories. 440 CFR 415 subpart B, aluminum sulfate production. 40 CFR 415 subpart BB, sodium bisulfite production. 40 CFR 417 subpart P, liquid detergent manufacturing. 40 CFR 417 subpart Q, dry detergent blending. 40 CFR 439 subpart D, pharmaceutical manufacturing. The city also requires 2 processes to be zero discharge buildings. And those 2 processes are a solvent line and an alcohol line. And the city has chosen to make those zero discharge in order to ensure the safety of the collection system and prevent any hazard that could come from solvent or alcohol entering the sewer system. So here's a quick overview of the different buildings that they have on site and some of their different production lines. As you can see, they have many different buildings, and each building can house more than one of their production lines. So you have anything from a warehouse to the aluminum sulfate and ferric and ferrous compounds to cement additives to a truck maintenance shop and a dispatch office and a laboratory. It is so various that sometimes it is hard to keep up with everything that they do on site. As far as pretreatment standards, let's check out what the regulation is and the process, and then what the requirements are for that. So for 40 CFR 415 subpart B, which is our aluminum sulfate production, that requires a zero discharge. They cannot discharge any water related to that production process. No cleaning, no anything. No water can go down the drain. For 40 CFR 415 subpart BB, which is our sodium bisulfite production, the regulated pollutant is chromium. And for 40 CFR 417 subpart P, which is our liquid detergent manufacturing, that requires a COD to BOD7 production ratio reporting. And for 40 CFR 417 subpart Q, our dry detergent blending, that is also a zero discharge production process. And then for 40 CFR 439 subpart D, our pharmaceutical manufacturing, they're required to regulate for acetone, N-amyl acetate, ethyl acetate, isopropyl acetate, methylene chloride. And then our solvent building and our alcohol-based products are also zero discharge production lines. So what sort of pre-treatment system do they have at their facility? So we know that they have 4 different monitoring points, and each monitoring point has a different pre-treatment system. So for our monitoring point 1, that includes brines, boiler blowdown, and drainage. And as we can see, that comes from building K, which was our nitrate and nitrite compounds, as well as building L. Monitoring point 2 is their largest pre-treatment system that they have, which takes the flow from a lot of their buildings. It takes the flow from 4 of their buildings, including some of the categorical processes. So the pre-treatment system for monitoring point 2 includes settling ponds, an EQ tank, they pH adjust, they add some flocculation, and they settle it. It's also attached to a sludge drying bed, and then before it is discharged, they pH test again. And through that monitoring point, we see about 29,000 gallons a day going out the door. Monitoring point 3, that is their pharmaceutical categorical monitoring point. And so they have an equalization tank and a pH adjustment and discharge about 4,000 gallons a day from their pharmaceutical process. And monitoring point 4, which is the final monitoring point before all of their wastewater leaves the facility. This monitoring point also takes in some of the buildings, and they pH adjust and they defoam, and then they pH test as it goes out the door. From the just the buildings that go to the additional buildings that go to monitoring point 4, it is about 8,000 gallons a day, and then this combines with the rest of their facility flow, and about 90,000 gallons a day go through monitoring point 1. They are required to have a continuous pH monitoring system and flow recording on monitoring point 4. So what do we need to look for in a detergent manufacturer? This is a picture of your standard typical detergent line. They'll have bottles go through the processing. You'll see them filled up. They'll cap them and get them ready to ship. Some facilities will also do their own bottles. They'll blow mold, and that is usually a non-contact process and will discharge to the sewer system. One of the biggest concerns with detergent manufacturers is foam. As you can see from these pictures that were taken, this manhole is probably about 8 feet down in depth, and the foam is so thick and so high that it has knocked our composite sampler off the hanging and ruined the sample. You can also see that these pictures were taken at various dates. So this is a consistent problem that we experience with detergent manufacturing. And the city of Salt Lake has more than one facility that does manufacture detergents. So sometimes it can be very hard to identify which facility is causing foaming issues once it hits the POTW. And if that's not enough, there's always more foam. You can see that it goes all the way up the sample tubing and all the way around the top of the manhole ring. So they can cause quite a lot of foam, and the city has required them to add defoamer so that foaming is not an issue. So some questions to ask in relation to detergent or soap manufacturing is, are only soaps manufactured, detergents, or both? This is very important because soaps and detergents are manufactured using very different processes and very different chemicals. So it could be an issue if one or the other or both are being manufactured within the same facility. Is foam a problem at the POTW? Is foam a problem in the collection system? How is cooling water used? Is it a closed loop system? Is it a once pass? What happens to the cooling water? How are liquid materials stored? Are air scrubbers used? Are the air scrubbers dry or wet? If they are a wet air scrubber, is that discharged to the sewer system? And then in product purification steps, how are filter backwashed handled? And how are spills handled? What if there is a large spill of detergent and you're the only operator, and so you just grab a hose and spray it down to the sewer system? How does the permittee prevent large spills from entering the sewer system? And then our drains in the production area, they could have some protocols where there are drains in the area, but they are covered at all times during production so that no spills can reach the sewer system. So these are just some questions to get you thinking about what to ask if you were to run into a soap and detergent manufacturer in your city. The next categorical in this chemical manufacturer is pharmaceutical manufacturing. So this is a picture representative of a small pharmaceutical process. Some processes can be large, some can be small. It all just depends on what they are doing at your facility. So what do you want to look for when you go to a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility? So what types of processes are used to manufacture the products? Depending on the process can depend on the category and the regulations. Okay, what steps in the manufacturing processes produce wastewater? What types of solvents are used? How are spent solvents disposed of? Is raw water intake purified? What frequency is equipment washed down, performed, and what is the volume of wastewater generated? And is there a research lab in the plant? These are all great questions to ask your facility as you go on an inspection. So we also have multiple pharmaceutical manufacturers in the city of Salt Lake, and it has been very interesting to work with them on various issues. As pharmaceuticals become more of a hot topic, how are pharmaceuticals disposed of? We had one facility request to discharge to start up a production line that would produce ibuprofen as their active ingredient in one of their medications that they produced. And they wanted to discharge all of the wastewater associated with this ibuprofen production line. And it was very interesting as we went through the process of their request. So we had them submit their request, and we had them submit the SDS sheets associated with the chemicals that they would be using. And as the city received these requests and the SDS sheets, we were able to take a really good look at what are the effects of some of these chemicals. And one of the biggest things that we looked at was the aquatic toxicity that could be present in the discharge, and especially in this case with ibuprofen, it can be fairly toxic to aquatics in certain concentrations. And so we were able to go back to the permitted facility and say, hey, we are concerned about the toxicity of this new production line. What are you going to do to ensure that this is no longer toxic when it reaches the POTW? And after a lot of back and forth between the facility and the city, a solution was come to and agreed upon, and it was really great to be able to have that working relationship with the facility and be able to express our concerns, but to have that permitted facility respond to those concerns and want to be a partner in the process, and to want to be responsible, environmentally responsible, to take that accountability and to make sure that they were doing all that they could to make sure none of it went down the drain. And I believe they ended up with an evaporation unit for their IB impacted wastewater. So they evaporated it and then disposed of it as a solid or a hazardous waste. And so it was really great to work through that process with the permitting. We have received several other requests along those lines. And so that is something that you as the control authority should be aware of in not only relationship to pharmaceuticals, but to any new chemical or production process that a permitted facility wants to make that change. So you really want to make sure that you look at those SDS sheets and make sure that it will be compatible and that your treatment plant will be able to handle the wastewater and the potential loading coming from those new processes. Okay, and then chemical manufacturing. Since they are a chemical manufacturer, let's talk about what to look for at a chemical manufacturing plant and what some of the things are that we have found as we have gone on our inspections of this facility. So, I mean, first off, they deal with chemicals day in, day out. We know that certain chemicals can be very corroding. If you notice the picture on the left, that is a storage tank that holds thousands of gallons of chemicals, and its foundation is crumbling due to chemical corrosion. And so, what do you do about that? And the picture on the right, you can see that the top of the manhole, which was fairly new, only a couple years old when the picture was taken, is already corroding and can be pulled off and pulled apart from the hydrogen sulfide that is in that manhole. So it's very important. You never know where you're gonna find issues when you go on inspection. So it's always important to keep your eyes open and to constantly look about and see what is going on. And so in regards to this tank on the left that was corroded, the city did require the facility to get a structural engineer to evaluate the safety of that structure and to be able to ensure the city that it wouldn't collapse and it wouldn't spill and it wouldn't reach the sewer system. And the permittee did end up replacing that structure when all was said and done. Sulfur, you can tell that they were preparing for an inspection. The sulfur in this picture did not magically stop at the grate. Someone came and shoveled it off. You can see there's just mounds and mounds of it that's just running, and I mean, you can definitely tell that it made it to the sewer system. So what to do about that? I mean, we did require them to clean it up, but I had no idea that someone would just allow this molten sulfur to just run and not keep up on their general housekeeping. And you can see that it's not a habit that they were into. And so we helped them to develop a habit of maintaining general housekeeping in all of their facilities. And this was actually behind a locked door that we made them open. And so once again, you just make sure you take your time, and if there's something you want to see, you tell them what you want to see, and make sure you get the answers that you want. This is a picture of an access point on their facility. They had an SSO event. It wasn't very large, just enough to fill this little containment structure, but they were too lazy to clean it, and they just left it to dry, which is very disgusting and can also be a public threat to health and to the environment. I would have never expected to find this at a facility. And so once again, the city required them to clean it up and to submit evidence of the cleanup once they were done with this. They are a large facility. They have over 17 buildings, many acres, and they have totes upon totes upon totes with barrels upon barrels upon barrels around their entire facility, but the majority of them aren't labeled. As an inspector, this is frightening because, hey, what am I walking into? What are these chemicals? Are they compatible? What are they doing there? And why are they not labeled? Sometimes can seem a little suspect. And so it's very important that everything is properly labeled so that the facility knows and that you as the inspector know what is going on as you walk around the facility. So this is part of their loading and for the aluminum sulfate. And if you recall, this is a zero discharge process. And it's a little hard to tell, but in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see where the loading hose is, that there is a pile of material with a very clear trail mark leading down to the drain. And so you want to make sure that, once again, this comes to good housekeeping. Is this permitted facility employing good housekeeping? That good housekeeping would resolve a lot of the problems that we've seen. But this, as a zero discharge regulation, they're obviously in violation of that, and the city required them to clean it up and then to implement some SOPs that would ensure that this would not be a problem in the future going forward. Housekeeping. Once again, these pictures are around the same place, so they are actually at the pretreatment system of monitoring point 2, and they have some sludge drying beds. In this picture on the left, you can see that they've piled the sludge so high that it has fallen off into this little trench area. And this trench area is actually a recirculation for their clarifiers, so that anything that overflows can recirculate through their pre-treatment system before being discharged. But how can it recirculate when there's sludge, tarp, hoses, pallet, buckets? On the other side, you got drums and unlabeled totes and just trash everywhere. So that was very concerning when we saw that. And once again, we just encouraged them to keep up with the house cleaning, and we made them clean everything up and clean their drying bed so that they would have space, and that resolved a lot of the issues. And that's something that we check year after year. Every time we go do an inspection at this facility, we make sure that they are keeping up on these requirements or encouragements that we have given them, and especially with the housekeeping. Another thing to look out for with a chemical manufacturer is color, and we have a great relationship with our collection system. They'll be cleaning the system by this facility, and they'll shoot us a picture and say, hey, I noticed this color coming out of their line. What's going on? What are they doing today? And then that allows us as the pre-treatment program to say, hey, look, we have a picture. What are you discharging today that is not normal? And it could be anything from maybe they're cleaning their ferric lines to doing some other manufacturing process that the city wasn't aware of. And so it's always great to have that relationship with your collection system where you can work together to identify and hopefully resolve issues. And then this facility is right on the middle of a public roadway, and decided to stage barrels upon barrels upon barrels of chemicals on the roadway. This is a great concern. What if the forklift missed and punctured the barrels? Though it would probably go to stormwater and not sewer, it still is a huge safety concern to the public. So just, you never know what you're gonna find. It's always a surprise. And so some questions to keep in mind when you go to a chemical manufacturer. Are their processes batch or continuous? And then what are their products and the raw materials? Since they deal in chemicals all around, it's important to know both. And then, are laboratories used for research and product testing, and how are those wastes disposed of? Are storage areas near drains leading to the sewer? What sort of pretreatment systems do they have on site? What about cooling water or boiler blowdown? And how is deionized water used, generated, or are columns regenerated on site? There's so many different assets of looking at any permitted facility, but especially a chemical manufacturer, that they can be overwhelming and challenging. And sometimes, you learn a little more at each inspection that you go to with your facility. So in conclusion, we know that every industry is different. It is so important for us as the inspector to do our research before an inspection, learn about the industry. When we go on site, they see us as an expert, and so we need to have that background knowledge to be able to effectively conduct an inspection, regardless of whether it's a brewery, a refinery, a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. We, as inspectors, are required to have a vast knowledge base. Inspect with your eyes wide open and ask lots of questions. There's never anything wrong with wanting clarification or wanting to see what's behind the door or wanting to understand what the process is and how the process works. And also, we just never want to forget what our goals of pretreatment are. And that is to protect the POTW, the workers, and the environment. And those really are our goals when we go into our permitted or unpermitted facilities and inspect them, is we want to ensure the safety of the workers and us and the environment. And so there is my contact information, and I thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. We appreciate you speaking with us today. We have several questions for you today. So if we can go through those, that would be great. The first one is, there was an attendee who wanted to know the staff level for those 100 permittees that you have there in Salt Lake.
Yep, that's a great question. So we have 5 permit writers and a sampler, myself, and a regulatory compliance manager who all put time towards our pretreatment program.
Great, thank you. Next question, does zero discharge mean no flow at all?
Correct, absolutely no flow allowed, whether that's production flow, cleaning flow, nothing is allowed to go down the drain on those zero discharge requirements.
Perfect. The next question is a little more in depth, and I apologize, I can't remember the beginning title slide. So it was right before the detergent category, where you had all the different subparts. And so the question basically is, what is the end product for the company that is categorized with all those like 8 different subparts?
Yeah, they have multiple different endpoints. So they produce a lot of wastewater chemicals that go to different processes in a wastewater plant. They produce lots of agricultural chemicals that go to the farming and the ranching, just various different chemicals. They do your disinfecting chemicals. They do, I mean, they just have such a variety because they produce so many different products. They go to a variety of different endpoints.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, with the addition of defoaming agents, what is the adverse effects that you've had on the collection system? And is there a preferred type or brand of defoamer that you can recommend to industries to use instead?
So we don't make specific recommendations. I think it depends on what is in your permit limits for your water reclamation facility. I mean, some can contain phosphorus or quaternary ammonias that can be detrimental. As far as what we've seen nothing but positive effects from their defoaming, as the number of incidents of foaming have decreased largely since they have started that practice.
Perfect. Next question, do the chemical or pharmaceutical manufacturers have any special PPE requirements outside of normal PPE? And if so, how do you deal with those?
Yes, so the chemical manufacturing doesn't have any additional PPE, but the pharmaceutical does. That's you're in full suits, you're bootied up, suits, hairnet, FDA standard inspections, and so usually the facilities will provide that PPE for us when we go on site, and we follow their protocol in when to put that on and when to take it off.
Perfect. Back to foaming again. Is there any foam allowed in the discharge, or does the defoam need to make the effluent completely foam free?
So in our ordinance, we say no foaming. So it should be foam free when it is discharged from the facility.
Makes sense. Thank you. Question regarding, this is right when we were talking about the sulfur issues, or prior to that. With the enforcement of the SSO, did you get the health department involved at all?
We did not on that event. It was very localized. It was in that 3x3 little graded area, cemented area, and it did not overflow that area. So it was very small and very contained.
Excellent. What type of industry had that significant sulfur issue?
That was our chemical manufacturer.
Okay, great. And out of your staff, who does the annual inspections?
I do the annual inspections as the pretreatment program coordinator, along with the regulatory compliance manager.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Lindsay. We appreciate you taking the time and speaking to all of us today.
Thank you.
Yes, that was a really great presentation. We're going to go ahead and open the polls, our final poll for the day. You should be seeing it on your screen now. And again, let us know if you have any issues with taking the polls, especially if you need CEUs for this, for today's session. Okay, great. I'm going to close the poll, share the results, and we have one more. While we're wrapping up this poll, I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for attending today. I think we had not only a great turnout, but we had some really great sessions. Our next webinar series is this coming Thursday, same time, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So November 5th, 8 to noon. You can check out our agenda to see what we have on the schedule. I did want to wrap up with just a bit of an announcement about our networking social that I mentioned earlier, that we're going to utilize Zoom to do a video, kind of an in-person gathering of the pretreatment professionals, similar to what we usually do at our in-person events. We're going to have 3 breakout rooms. One breakout room, the topic will be outreach and education. It's going to be give you the opportunity to talk to other pretreatment program professionals about wipes, pollution prevention, fog. The second room is going to be program mechanics. So, sewer use ordinances, permitting, enforcement, stuff like that. And then finally, the third room will be a room to discuss program changes related to COVID. We thought that would be an interesting opportunity for all of us to share, what changes we've made and how we've muddled through this pandemic this year. So we hope that you can attend. It's going to be on Thursday, November 12th, and it'll start at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You'll need to sign up for this event. You'll need to get a Zoom invite. So the way we're going to coordinate that is we're asking you to email me directly and let me know which room you'd like to be invited to, because we're all going to start in one main community room, and then we'll break out after an introductory period, break out into these breakout rooms. So we'll have a proper slide on Thursday that will show you guys the topics. So you have a little bit of time to see if you can make it or not. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, thanks again, everyone, for attending today. If you do have questions, let me know. We will see everyone on Thursday. Bye.